welcome to Fresh Face Comics, the comic book podcast where a lifelong comic book reader guides his friend through the world of comics for the first time. My name is Joey Morgan, the aforementioned lifelong reader. With me, as always, is Jacob Licklider, the aforementioned newbie.
I didn't plan a bit for this episode because I think we need to just open the show with a quick content warning. We are covering comics today that go through several adult topics, including several heavy deaths, sexual assault, and just a lot of really heavy ideas.
Yeah, like a lot. But that said, I'm so excited because today we're talking about Hellblazer, which, like, from the very beginning of this podcast has been like my most anticipated episode for us to do. Because as you well know, and as for the information of the listeners that aren't Jamie, Hellblazer is my favorite comic of all time. I love John Constantine as a character. I love Hellblazer just as a series. It's fucking brilliant. And we're talking about the first two volumes, collected volumes of Hellblazer today, Original Sins and The Devil You Know. This is the first 13 issues of Hellblazer, plus the first annual, plus 2 issues of Swamp Thing, and a 2-part miniseries called The Horrorist.
This is long.
I've given a lot of time to John Constantine. I swear, not because I was favoring him. I waited till episode 49. I'm not favoring him.
I have to defend your decision to do both these volumes because I wouldn't be nearly as happy with the way things went if we just did the first volume. Because
I'm so glad you feel that way because Original Sins, while fantastic, it's not a complete story. Like, you need The Devil You Know to complete.
I'd argue the issue here falls on DC Comics for collecting it in this
absolutely
weird way.
However, it does give me an excuse to have you read significantly more Hellblazer than I would have otherwise. So I'm really not complaining. So, all right, I guess getting into it, Jacob, what is Hellblazer about?
So it's about John Constantine and how much of an utter mess this man is. Like, so Constantine at this point had appeared in Swamp Thing quite a bit, as far as I know.
Yep.
Mainly was written by one Alan Moore, created by Alan Moore. Apparently exists in the real world.
Real person, John Constantine. This is his story.
And it's not just they might have seen someone who looks a bit like Sting. No, Alan Moore and several others have claimed that they have met John Constantine.
Isn't Neil Gaiman one of them?
I don't know.
I think Neil Gaiman has said that he met John Constantine once.
I know Jamie Delano also said he met Constantine.
I fucking love that this is not like something they came up with together. This is something they all claim to have done individually. I love it.
Yeah. So what this is DC Comics in 1988 deciding essentially we're going to write a supernatural horror book that has no real superhero ties. Like, this is not a superhero book. Nope. Like, this is a straight up horror book.
There were more superheroes in our first 2 Vertigo books than there were here.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very separated.
Like, we are essentially pioneering what will become Vertigo. Because this is still a couple years before, mostly a couple years before Vertigo was a thing. Then we jump forward to like 3 years into Vertigo being a thing for the last 2 issues.
Yeah.
We'll get to those there.
We will get to those.
And I'd argue this is an exploration of somebody whose life has fallen apart and they just have to keep going. And they never quite put themselves back together.
Indeed.
Because this is a book where John Constantine is a character. He's our one real constant in all of these issues. And so much is in flux. This is the start of a comic series that ran for 300 issues.
Yes.
On several writers. This being Jamie Delano, who is a writer I actually had some slight familiarity with. as
Yes,
well as
including the main artist for the first volume, John Ridgway.
Ridgway. They both worked together on the Doctor Who magazine comics of the mid
Yep.
1980s,
Which are very different from
are
Delano and Ridgway's work
are
here.
I mean, stylistically, Ridgway's art is fairly similar.
Yeah, yeah. Ridgway has a very specific style, but Delano is doing some very different things.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's what this book is.
Yes.
It's utterly fascinating. I argue it's not for the faint of heart.
No. I
We go to
think
some
I think you
very
straight
dark.
up told me as you were reading it, like it's the darkest thing we've ever read,
Oh
and
yeah, this is it. It's dark, but it never quite feels even when at its lowest point because there are a couple of issues here, mainly at the end, which aren't great. It never feels edgy 90s dark, despite going to those levels of darkness.
mhm.
Like, you never feel like Delano's particularly enjoying writing this dark story, like, and
Yeah.
relishing in it.
hmm
Uh,
But he knows what kind of character John is, and he's being so incredibly true to that. Headlining his very first solo book ever, and he wants people to know exactly who John is, separated from the Swamp Thing context he was previously presented in before this. So
yes.
yeah,
Uh, Before I move into Twitter questions, I will give one final sort of warning for if you're going to pick up these books. Original Sins, the way it is collected, at least in physical, the individual issue covers are not until the very end of the book. So that kind of screwed me up a little bit when reading, honestly. Like,
it really shouldn't screw you up that much.
it made it feel a little weird reading this first volume. Um,
Huh.
Um, and I'm especially annoyed because the Hellblazer like series covers are Dave McKean covers.
Yeah. It's a shame, but also, I mean, like, it's I don't know. I don't think it really affects the way I read the story personally. But anyway, Twitter question time. All right. Kicking off with let's go with our most recent question from Jamie at Jamie_season 7 says, "Why is it so fucking good?" Jacob, take it away.
That's not to completely bury the lead. Probably because honestly, Jamie Delano's pissed at Margaret Thatcher.
Yep.
Like
Hates
that's
Thatcher, hates 1980s England where he lived, and just desperately wanted people to know how much he hated being there.
also partially because I'd argue because of John Ridgway and Richard Piers Rayner, who are sort of our main artists for both of these books.
Mhm.
I don't think that with either of them the style would have worked nearly as well had it not been for these two artists in particular.
Yeah,
Um,
very possible. Very possible. There are some fantastic artists that take on Hellblazer throughout its entire run, and they're amazing.
yeah, but these artists in particular had
As
to
the ones that
sell the
that kick it
book.
off. Yeah, exactly. Them and Dave McKean's covers, of course, which are big point in that. But yeah, it's angry political messages. It's also just fucking awesome. Like, John Constantine is a rat bastard of a character, and the story is serviced by him being as horrible as he is. It's yeah, it's just fucking great. I love it. Which actually, I do want to go into our Discord question of today from our friend Andrew, because we kind of touched on it in our opening, but I want to expand on it here. Andrew says, "I have no idea what Hellblazer is. How would you explain it to a newbie like me in one sentence or less?" I've kind of
Uh,
been thinking about this question all day, actually, because like I don't know how I would do it in one sentence.
if let's say if you took the horror influences of Clive Barker, Stephen King, William Peter Blatty, and smushed them together with Alan Moore, and then got someone who is definitely not Alan Moore to write it.
Yeah,
Uh,
because while it is very much a Vertigo title, it's not Alan Moore. Like it's
No.
it's not Alan Moore, it's not Neil Gaiman. There are three big Vertigo writers that we've taken on in this: Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, and now Jamie Delano. Are very different writers. None of them write their stories the same way, I think.
Yeah, they're all from sort of the same school of thought as well,
Yeah.
which is fascinating.
Yeah.
And from sort of that same pool of very British writers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. On to our next Twitter question comes from, let's go English Giraffe. At English_giraffe says, thoughts on Matt Ryan as Constantine? I don't think you've seen anything with him, have you?
I've seen some clips of him, and I had obviously seen the first episode.
Oh, that's right. I forgot you watched the first episode of the show.
Constantine on broadcast. And from what I remember, I enjoyed his performance.
I adore Matt Ryan so much as Constantine. Like, we really could never have asked for a better actor to be playing the character. Yeah, I don't know. I think he's perfect. I really cannot imagine pretty much anyone else in the role fitting as well as Matt Ryan does, personally. So, yeah. English Giraffe also says, honestly, I'm surprised that DC has managed to keep him for so long. Even when the DC animated films got a reboot, Ryan was one of the rare ones to come back. I think Matt Ryan just likes playing the role a lot, actually.
Yeah.
He likes playing the role. He was screwed over by NBC when the show was canceled. They purposely just wanted to axe the show because they didn't like it for some reason. And Matt Ryan felt he wanted to do more things with the character and is still feeling that. And that's a great thing. I will never complain when Matt Ryan is yet again announced as playing Constantine for some reason, because he transcends all universes, apparently.
Part of me wonders if the new DCU, because they're doing a Swamp Thing film, right?
They are.
And, James Mangold has said one of his influences is going to be the Moore run.
Yeah. In which
there's a non-zero chance we could have Matt Ryan in a theatrical film.
This is why I think you remember when they were first announcing the Sandman cast for the Netflix adaptation. I was like, we could still get Matt Ryan as Constantine. It could still happen. And you were like, no. I'm like, but you don't understand. He transcends all universes. Like, it just happens. Like, he exists everywhere because he is Constantine. He's so fucking good. Which kind of brings me into our next Twitter question from Kian at Kian the Quark. Says, still waiting for the adaptation that actually makes him Scouse. Fuck making him Scouse. No, Matt Ryan is perfect, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, that's not to say that, there haven't been there hasn't been at least one other good person to play the role. I do love Taron Egerton in the role in the Sandman Audible. Yes. He's fantastic. But also, I can't really see him doing a live-action version of the character. He very much fits the voice, and he was cast to be the voice of Constantine, and he totally works. So, yes. Yeah. At Jamie_season7 has some more questions. Why did DC make a Constantine film where he's American and not political? I don't know.
I haven't seen that film,
yep.
So I'm not going to comment.
Yeah, I really can't answer that for you, Jamie. I've seen it once. I promise to never watch it again, but we'll probably do it as adapted material someday. And I'm
like when we get to. I thought you said what, the Ennis stuff?
Yeah. So the only from memory, if memory serves, there's one scene in the Keanu Reeves film that actually adapts something from the comics. And it's the last scene, and it's something from the Ennis run. So yeah. Anyway,
is it a sequel bait type thing.
It's no. It's it is actually the ending of the film, and it's just a scene pretty much straight from Dangerous Habits, which is actually quite good because they got Peter Stormare to play the devil, and he's fucking fantastic. So anyway, Jamie also says, also not a question, but this is the best comic cover of all time, and he shared the cover of Hellblazer #3, which is the anti-Thatcher issue, and it is fucking perfect. I do love it with the demonic looking Thatcher on the cover, the sign up top that says voting Tory can damage your health. It's fucking perfect. I love it. It's so good.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, it's worth noting, our very first question of today, pretty much right after I posted the Q&A, came from the one that always comes last. Rules Panda at Joey Can Read This says, finally, one time, who would win, Constantine or Constantine? He posted a GIF of I believe the villain from one of the Disney Muppets films.
Yeah, who is an evil doppelganger of Kermit the Frog.
Yes, named Constantine, and then also Kian joined in and said, or Dr. Constantine, the character from Doctor Who: The Empty Child, which this is the weirdest crossover.
I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah, no, this is I mean, who would win?
Oh, John would win. Like,
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. John has magic and
yeah.
And the like. Yes.
Yeah.
All
right, I guess that about covers. Oh my god, I can't fucking speak today, but I will learn to speak for my boy. That covers our non-spoiler section and our Twitter questions. As always, if you want to find out what we're covering next time on the podcast, which is episode 50, fucking god, we're coming up on episode 50. Be sure to skip to the end of the podcast where I tell Jacob what episode 50 is.
I am so excited.
I'm so excited too. I started rereading it the other day, and I'm very excited. So, be sure to stick around or skip to the end of the episode if you don't want to hear spoilers for these 2 volumes that we're about to cover. If you don't want to hear spoilers because you haven't read the books, read the books, please. I'm just asking you, begging you, if you will. Stick around to the episode. Also, I'll have our link trees in the description below, as well as links to these books and the books we're covering next time on the podcast. All down in the description, wherever you're listening to us: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, whatever the other hundreds, I'm sure, platforms that we're on without my permission. So there's that. And I guess, are we ready to move on? Any last thoughts before we go into spoilers?
Yeah. No, let's move on because we have a lot to cover.
We do have a lot to cover. Here we go.
So what's especially interesting, right, is despite there being a big overarching plot for, I'd argue, the first 10 issues?
It's like the first 12 issues.
First 12,
yeah, because it doesn't really end until issue 12.
Yeah. But there are a lot of mini arcs. So this first mini arc is basically the first 2 issues.
Before we actually get into this, I want to comment on the cover of Original Sins. It's Jim Lee on this first cover for Original Sins as a collection. There's this fallen, fucked up looking angel behind Constantine with the wings sprouting behind him, and it's fucking beautiful. I don't know, I love it. Anyway,
it's an angel that does not appear in the story.
It does not. It's just a really cool picture.
Yes.
All right. So you're right. First mini arc here. The first 2 issues make their own sort of little story, and I'm excited to talk about this. I'm so excited to talk about all of this, but just these first couple issues in particular, because this, I don't know. I adore Feast of Friends as a story as a whole, which is sort of just like the collective name for the first 2 issues, and is also like the only story from the comics that got like directly adapted into the show. Same name and everything, so you can see why it's really good. Because right from the start, my favorite thing about this first page alone is the fly in the corner. Like the fly opens the book.
Yes,
and he like comes out of the panel and brings us into the story. It's the story of this guy named Henry Wambach, who is very hungry. I love right away you get a feel for Jamie Delano's prose. He, despite the fact that it's a comic and it's a visual medium, Delano doesn't just rely on the art to tell his story in a very smart way. We've commented on the word to art ratio in comics a lot before, but I think Delano does something really interesting with his narration and his inner monologue by just taking the time to just write some really beautiful prose that is something that maybe the art isn't able to do, and just describes things in a way that I think really just throw you into a scene and get you to really feel what's going on. My favorite thing here in this first scene is how he describes it as like there's this fledgling inside Henry that like just anything he eats is consumed by this other creature within him, and the food actually isn't going in Henry. It's a beautiful sort of like way to describe it. I adore it. It's so, the text is so rich, and Ridgway's art just immediately shows you just how disturbing some of these stories can be, despite the fact that it's not the most disturbing thing to happen in the book.
It's not the most disturbing thing to happen in the book, but it is very disturbing. Like, this man just eats and eats and eats until he becomes skin and bones and then falls over dead. Like, that's our first 3 pages, and that is a damn scary opener. Like,
it is. Oh my god. I
um,
love it. I love it. I love it. And then we meet the man. We meet the man, John Constantine himself. Which you commented when you read it is a fantastic introduction. We're met with this really great inner monologue as John makes his way back home. You know, we see we meet his sort of landlady here. What's her name? Mrs. M. And she complains about this like guy that like came to see him, and that she like let him into his apartment. And John is just like, you know, being John. He's like blowing all this off. He doesn't care. John cares about very little, which actually is worth mentioning right now, because I actually am like, it's kind of escaping me at the moment. Aside from like Trinity War, maybe. What do you really know about John Constantine? Like, what did you know like going into this first scene?
Well, so obviously I knew Trinity War and the Sandman. I knew he was sort of a magician. I knew he was, you know, a very popular character, depending on the circles that you're in.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I knew that he was kind of a bastard. Like, he's our protagonist. He's not a good. I mean, he is morally gray. I mean, he's an Alan Moore character, right? Like, that's the best way to describe him. And I think the first panel where, like, that first page where you see John in the pouring rain, in this book, is a perfect introduction. Like, it's this great, you know, this man is a sad, pathetic man who has his life fallen apart. And that's what we're going to explore. I was kind of expecting there was, oddly enough, in places of this book, though, less supernatural elements than I was expecting.
Yeah,
because there's some bits of this book that are in the second volume, in particular, that are just extended dream sequences to analyze the character for an issue.
Yeah,
which is interesting, and fascinating. But yeah, his introduction here, you really get a sense for how small he is. We find out about one Gary Lester, who is someone John has known for a long time. Is sadly a drug user, and this flat is full of flies and roaches, and it's disgusting. And he finds Gary covered in bugs in the bathtub.
And I love that John's immediate reaction is just to slam the door shut and try to leave. Like he's like, nope, can't be bothered with that. Which actually is also a thing that I think is an attitude that sort of like got adapted into the show. I don't know if you remember, because I know you said you saw the first episode of you know, when it first aired. But there's that great scene when he's in Ravenscar at the start, and he goes to see this woman that's possessed, and she like turns her head and her like eyes are widened out, and he's like, all right, nope, this is not my problem, and he just goes to like walk away. Because he's horrified by it, but also it's just like, I really just do not have the energy to deal with this today. And that's sort of energy that, you know, we immediately see here. I love the way Delano just writes this character.
I also find it fascinating with the way that in the next scene, Delano populates Britain.
Yes, yeah, like, very important to note here.
Full of skinheads and racists and the worst people imaginable. Very much like, you can feel sort of the anti-Thatcher sentiments done very, very well.
Yeah.
Done so early, which I think it's important to the identity of the book. It's also something I don't know if DC today would have the balls to publish.
Oh God, no! So much of
like
Hellblazer. I mean, so much of Vertigo, which is partially why Vertigo exists, because DC, didn't actually have the balls to publish a lot of what was being put in Vertigo, so they put it under a different label. So that's literally it. So, Constantine gets a bunch of bug sprays and things, and he calls over his friend Chaz, who's a character I don't think you were really familiar with at all, right?
no, I know he's a character who exists, and if I'm gonna be honest, I think we could have spent a little more time fleshing out Chaz at some point in in these two volumes when we
Yeah, he doesn't
don't
really.
quite.
Yeah, he doesn't really get a lot of chances. Actually, honestly, the first writer, in my opinion, on Hellblazer to really expand on Chaz as a character is Garth Ennis.
Scar.
Delano doesn't do too much of the character. He does get some nice little moments. So we see a couple of those small moments in these two volumes, but he doesn't have much to do with the character as a whole. And then Ennis, I think, really takes the reins on Chaz. But yeah, so he calls Chaz over. They examine Gary, Lester, and John goes in. John like hypnotizes Gary and gets him to tell his story of what happened to him. Gary was over in, where do they say he was?
In the Medina, which is in the Middle East, city in the Middle East.
And so he goes over there. He sees that there was this kid out there possessed with these markings all over him. And Gary, in a moment where he was sort of, it seems, trying to be like John Constantine, a dear friend of his, tries to help this kid by tying the kid to a bed, unleashing this demon, performing an exorcism, and trapping this demon literally in a bottle. And he takes this bottle with him. The bottle is we learned that the demon inside this bottle is named Nemoth, which I don't know. I think it's just a cool name for a demon. It's just like it's a name that sticks in my mind a lot, and it may just be my love for these first two issues alone talking there. But I don't know. I love that name. But yeah, Gary tries to go back to talk to Constantine when Nemoth accidentally gets out of the bottle, and begins to wreak havoc on his own. And so he goes back to John's apartment or flat. I should be saying flat. I just, for some reason, I can't make my mind do that. And he goes to Constantine's landlady, who goes to deliver a parcel for John, which we can assume John never even got at this point over in America. Where he's been staying with, as they say very briefly in some of John's inner monologue here, he's been frequenting a lot because he's been in Swamp Thing, so that's how we like rationalize that. And yeah, so we have
we then move into some very interesting sort of investigative sequence of this first issue. Which I think is fascinating. We start going to a professor of anthropology at the British Museum.
After, it's important to note that John has Gary like draw out the markings that were on the kid that he freed Nemoth from. Like John like starts going around investigating. Chaz is sort of driving him everywhere until John eventually decides to head on over to Africa. A quick jaunt over to Africa.
Africa. A lot of this is also, I feel, it happens more than once through both these collections. Some of it is Jamie Delano homaging The Exorcist.
Yes, very much so.
Like,
yeah.
That's what this Africa sequence feels like in particular. It's what the exorcism earlier in the issue is drawn to look like. Much later on, there's a demon design possessing a woman that just looks like
Reagan.
In The Exorcist. So we're drawing on some very nice visual shorthand to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
All while John is searching for information about Nemoth. And the whole idea, building to the idea of a demon that eats and eats and eats and eats, but leaves people hungry and thin.
They say like Nemoth is literally known as like the hunger demon. John goes out and finds this old man in Africa who knows about Nemoth, and we get this absolutely gorgeous sequence where in order to find out more about Nemoth, the old man puts Constantine through this ritual that is gorgeously drawn in this 2-page spread by John Ridgway, who
Yes.
where the old man takes out his eye, takes out John's eye, and it's done from like John's perspective, and you see this blood like trickling down the page here. As you get these like images of like what Nemoth does to people, and like how he like literally sucks the life out of people. The imagery here done a lot is a fly. It's like literally how the demon goes from like one person to another, until we eventually see Nemoth later on when it literally is a giant fly. And after learning about this, John makes his way back over to find Gary. They take Gary to. I hesitate to say friend when referring to one Papa Midnight.
An associate called
An
Papa
associate,
Midnight.
an acquaintance, if you will, who is a character that I adore, and admittedly, adaptations of John Constantine as a character like overstate Papa Midnight's importance. He doesn't actually appear in that many issues throughout the Hellblazer run.
Yeah, he just appears in these first two here.
Yeah, but like every I think both the Reeves movie and the show did Papa Midnight because they felt he was really important, and like I guess it just goes to show like how much of a presence he has as a character. They feel the need to do that, which is great. But yeah, Papa Midnight is he is a man interested in seems voodoo and different kinds of magic, different kinds of like black magic. We head on over to Papa Midnight's club, where where we run into one of Papa Midnight's zombies, who is just this giant mute stuck with a bunch of chickens in cages, who goes to attack Constantine, who Constantine just slaps in the face, and this like renders the zombie just like docile, I guess.
I mean, it's probably important to know that Papa Midnight is played as sort of the classic stereotype of a voodoo priest.
Yeah.
In the way he's just drawn, and like the zombies here are not flesh-eating zombies; they're hypnotized zombies.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Papa Midnight's actual introduction, sort of in this rooftop garden.
Yeah, when he actually like meets with Constantine and Gary.
And there's just this sense of foreboding that really starts to set in. While John is there to sort of walk around like he owns the place. And
we start setting up where the end of issue 2 is going to hit you here. And I was curious actually, like, just if you were picking up on that at all, because like
I was picking up on it. Like,
yeah, because go ahead.
This doesn't fit. You can't. I don't think Delano ever wants to make the reader think this is going to have a happy ending, right?
Oh God, no. Yeah,
like
yeah,
like this is a story of someone thinking they can put a demon in a bottle when they do not have the proper bottle to shove a demon into. At least,
and you see in a scene like this, you see like Constantine kind of like struggle internally, where you can see him like being like, okay, like he knows what he has to do to Gary in order to stop Nemoth, but because I find it interesting, because Delano hasn't properly set up to new readers that John Constantine has screwed over a shit ton of people in his life. You can play around with John's morality more early on here, when you don't know exactly how much he has already resigned himself to being a terrible person. But we do get this great little note at the end here when John and Gary when John is about to leave, and he leaves Gary with Midnight, and Midnight says to him, he's like, first tell me about your strange friend. Have you known him long? Do you trust him? And Gary says, I trust John with my life. And well, he does. Importantly, he does. So John leaves. He goes on over to
the flat of Emma, who is
who's dead.
Yeah, a dead woman.
A dead woman.
One of many. And meets with, one of the artist living in the building sees him painting this tribute to Emma and her death, but he's gotten the hair color wrong, and you can really see John's regret. He blames himself for Emma's death, so much so that he can just sit on the stairs going up to the flat, and right behind him is Emma, the ghost of Emma. One of the few ghosts, I'd argue, one of the few times a ghost feels like an actual ghost that is there and is not just part of Constantine's inner psyche. Because the way you can tell is because this is one of the few ghostly apparitions where the ghost is fully colored.
True, but it is also like the only time in both volumes that the ghosts are colored. Literally any other time they're here, they're white.
Yes.
John puts up this like immediate like defense mechanism of just trying to treat Emma like she's like still actually there, you know, even though we can Delano like puts John's thoughts on full display, you know, like you can see that he's troubled, but the way he writes John's dialogue when he's like bouncing off of Emma is a lot more like calm and collected. And as they're walking together, they see that Nemoth has gotten to someone else in the city who's just grabbing meats off of this tray and just shoving them down his throat. Nemoth like completely sucks the life out of this guy as the flies leave the guy and like go off to this church. John and Emma, well, I guess just John. We don't actually see Emma in this scene. John goes into the church where Nemoth is fully presented as a giant fly, and it's horrifying in the best sort of pulpy way. I love it. There's this priest at the bottom there that's like trying to like protect himself from the demon, and the first issue ends with Nemoth completely possessing the priest, and the priest are like screaming into the wooden crucifix at the altar. It's just it's a great way to end the first issue. It's super effective. I love it. Anyway, moving into issue 2.
Number 2.
Yes.
Which the first issue was double length. This
I know you had some problems with it, but
I felt it kind of slow. Despite that was sort of my big problem. I feel like it might have been, you could have actually tightened a couple of things up and made this a really strong first issue. And it just didn't do it as well for me.
I respectfully disagree, but okay. Moving on, issue 2. We go back to Papa Midnight's club, where we see he's having these zombie fights in one of the lower levels. John goes to see Gary then, who Midnight has been keeping in one of the cells below. And John just... You see that John is really troubled because now everything is actually in place to set up how we're going to defeat Nemoth. And John like barely speaks to him. It's just and Ridgway draws these like really just sorrowful faces that just I don't know. I knowing what's coming, it really hits hard. I love it.
It's also partially a metaphor. Like Gary's going through withdrawal symptoms. Gary's a drug addict, and Gary's fate is essentially one of a drug addict who fails to get clean, and the drug consumes him. This is an attempt to get clean, to go through withdrawal, and the drug represented by Nemoth the demon is going to kill him. That is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's at this point where we also see when we find out the ritual has to happen at dawn. So there's one night. John is given a room where he sees the ghost of a nun on a toilet.
Named Sister Anne Marie. He's met by other ghosts
in the closet.
Frank and Benjamin.
And
Emma rejoins this group of ghosts, and they don't say anything to John. So John is just sort of left to himself to just sort of yell at these ghosts that keep staring at him lifelessly. Because question as to whether or not they're actually here aside. They know what he's about to do is the point. And John just deflects all of this on them and goes to sleep. So, meanwhile, in the middle of the night, we see we get this great montage of Nemoth, the hunger demon, sort of possessing various people throughout the city,
taking on different forms of hunger. We have someone eating a copy of Action Comics #1,
which is so funny. Also, a Watchmen reference in there.
Yeah.
Did you see the Watchmen in the corner there?
No.
Oh, the smiley face.
Yep. I missed that.
Yeah. It's great.
But like, it's basically every sort of greed, religious hunger and fervor in one of these hexagonal panels, a hunger for jewelry and money, hunger for drugs, hunger for sex.
There's a guy that eats his own hand.
All for a hunger for that sort of a hunger for vanity. It's all fascinatingly done. In these couple of pages, and you just see the flies spreading as we build to the morning, where John tries to crack a joke in front of Papa Midnight before they're about to begin, but can't do it. And he's just trying to keep our spirits up. Which
John promises to Gary when he sees Gary that he'll get him a fix when it's all over with. They just need to do the ritual first. So they strap Gary to this electric chair, this defunct electric chair. Hopefully defunct electric chair.
I'm not entirely sure if it's completely defunct
either. But I think that's the idea.
John is wearing these shades. And we begin this ritual. And
we kill a chicken because of course we do.
Yes. And we make a circle of its blood. We summon the flies, they crawl everywhere, and the demon has to go.
And
Gary says, want to go.
As Nemoth is circling, Gary says, "It's too strong now, John. You never hold it. It'll never fit in the bottle, man. The bottle? You haven't got a bottle, John. How are you going to catch it?" And you see, this is one of my favorite scenes here. John Ridgway just draws this absolute terror on Gary's face, and who's on letters?
Realizes that
who's on letters here. Actually, I really want to know who's on letters here.
It's Annie Hathaway, who is also got her start in the mid-1980s Doctor Who magazine comics.
Yep. But who beautifully does, like, my favorite bubble here, the Constantine, you bastard, as the flies continue to swarm and they go towards Gary. John just with this indifferent look on his face, Gary terrified, and Midnight just smiling as the flies swarm around Gary. They consume him until all you can see are his eyes. They go or completely like surround his head, go inside of him. The flies are inside Gary now. John makes the markings on Gary to trap the demon inside of there, and we sedate him. John takes Gary down to the cells below.
Straitjacket. And
oh man, we get the hardest scene here. John is tasked with looking after Gary and Nemoth as just to make sure that Nemoth dies. John requests cigarettes and alcohol and lots of it, as it takes so many hours and an indescribable amount of hours for Gary and Nemoth to literally eat each other alive. And that is where we close out the main conflict.
We close out with John then having to face the light of day, only to see 4 ghosts across the street, and circling behind him a 5th.
Gary joins the long line of people that John has screwed over and inadvertently caused the deaths of, well, a bit more advertently here. But yeah, and that is where we end issue 2 and the first proper story of Hellblazer. How did you feel after this issue?
I felt emotionally drained.
that is Hellblazer.
I felt
for you.
emotionally drained after a lot of these issues, which might be why it took me a while to get through these books, honestly.
I mean, it is also like a lot of issues to go through.
That too, but it's also just a lot. What's especially nice is that there are a couple of issues where John does get an unambiguous win, because the next couple issues we're going through are fairly standalone.
Yeah, they're a bit more anthology-like, just sort of doing their own thing, despite the fact that some of the early ones will have ramifications later on. But yeah,
this third one is actually a prequel.
Yes, yeah. We flash back to what is
Election Day, 1987.
Yes, June 11th, 1987. We start on this guy running who
works for Mammon Investments. Mammon is the name of a demon, like in sort of Christian mythology. So someone. I don't say this guy should know better, but that's already telling the audience. Investment firms are evil.
I think Delano's whole message here, in this issue in particular, is just anyone in power is evil. But yeah,
I'd argue it's any capitalist in power is especially evil, because our villains are capitalist demons who run behind this guy, and basically make him exercise to death.
Yes, literally until his heart gives out.
They both lick the blood coming from his head as it falls.
And once again, Delano's political commentary is off the fucking charts. We get this great sign here as we focus on the guy's dead body on the title page. Vote Conservative on June 11th. We'll put the pound back in your pocket, with some graffiti scribbled over it saying, by taking it out of mine.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Let's actually get into it, because this is a really interesting issue, and an issue of its time. Like, you literally couldn't adapt this issue straight today.
Unless you set it in the 1980s. Unless you set it in the 80s.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think there are ideas you could take today and modernize. It would be very, very different. The plot would probably have to be rewritten to work with the world of today. But this is our first appearance of John. Well, John actually gives someone charity.
He does. It's a nice little moment. As all this is going on, John goes to see his friend Raymond,
who is one of the old queens.
Yes.
So, gay man living on his own in the late 1980s, in the middle of the AIDS crisis, in Thatcher's Britain. As soon as we introduce this character, one, he is a delightful character, and two,
absolutely.
I
love Ray.
I was very worried for what his fate was going to be. But yes.
I mean, it's Hellblazer, so realistically, you should be worried about everyone's fate. But
yes, but Ray seems like such a nice guy.
Yeah.
Because, like, at least with Gary was kind of an idiot. Like,
kind of like, there were warning signs. He could have gotten out realistically.
Probably shouldn't have done an exorcism on his own. And shoved a great demon into a bottle.
Yeah. But that's beside the point.
But Ray has been noticing several deaths around Spitalfields, including man drowns in guacamole, Deb chokes on cocktail umbrella, pet Persian cat fatally mauls merchant banker, jogger dead in melted running shoes. All these crazy deaths that he's asking John nicely to investigate. Because Ray knows he doesn't have, he knows when to leave himself well enough alone and when to send in someone like John who knows what they're doing.
Yeah. As all this is going on, My favorite thing that Delano does in this issue is he makes people that support Thatcher demons, like literal demons from hell. It's a beautiful thing that that Delano is just
This is
raging
our
about.
first image of hell. Our main demon here is Blathoxy, Lord of Flatulence.
It's lovely.
And he's portrayed as a old fat cat capitalist
Yep.
who's a devil. I'm very glad I wasn't expecting any subtlety, because I don't think
Mhm.
I think Delano not going subtle makes this all the better.
Oh yeah, yeah. This demon is also in the stock market. Stocks specifically in the conservatives, conservative souls specifically, is what he's betting on here, and that becomes our whole plot line here going forward. But let's see. Meanwhile, Constantine is going to investigate these deaths as he makes his way to this warehouse looking place. He finds that these demons are like sort of like hanging out together inside, and John makes his way then over to this like nightclub,
It
underground
was a
nightclub.
trendy wine bar. So a place that the conservatives have probably gentrified and pushed out locals for trendy older straight couples. Um, there, I believe that the way Delano describes it in his prose is, I don't want to make friends with this class of spoon-fed pond life.
Oh,
Uh,
so good. See what I
that's
mean?
not even.
Like Delano's prose makes a lot of these early issues. It's really deliberate. I love it.
It's also just the right amount of anger,
Mhm.
um, where John, actually has to mingle with these people,
Mhm.
and he clearly hates it, because these demons are preying on people. They prey on this woman, this female socialite who is high on all the cocaine, um, and that cocaine eventually causes her soul to blow out of her head. Um,
Literally, like making her head smoke. Like it's funny, and everyone like claps at it. Um, but John is then John like then like runs out. He tries to leave. He's he is spotted by these demons, but he makes his way like gets out safely. Um, he then performs a ritual to summon this other demon.
he's trying to
And
summon the Lord of Flatulence, but to just get a word with him, but can't, and a gets one of his discharges.
yes, who talks to Constantine, and Constantine says like that he goes to he wants to speak to the Lord of Flatulence. So he's allowed an audience. He goes to speak with the Lord of Flatulence. I just love saying that. He
In hell.
yes,
Uh,
we get this beautiful scene where Constantine is able to convince this demon that the conservatives are actually going to lose this election. And this is kind of what I love about Delano, like purposefully like wanting to make this story like what it is by setting it in literally in the past from when it was published. Is because like he can play around with real world events and just have John really mingle in that like in that world. I don't know, I kind of love that. But he John is sent back to his back to actually this actually isn't his flat right now, is it? I think it's just some place that he's kind of hiding out for the moment.
where the demons have found him.
Yes,
Um,
and they capture Constantine and hang him upside down and stick him in front of a TV where Thatcher is making a public appearance on election night,
um,
which I
and
just
like all,
again
well, I mean, she's giving a standard Margaret Thatcher fascist speech, basically about growth and strength, and how essentially Britain needs to be great and led with a strong hand, and we need to give all the money to the rich because it'll then trickle down to the poor. Which, of course, 40 years later, it has not. Uh,
and
but yeah,
also the fucking balls of Jamie Delano publishing this like while she was fucking prime minister.
while she was prime minister in her third term, I
Yeah, I
think.
believe it was her third. Yeah, like absolutely insane, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure that nobody really cared. I'm sure of this new comic book starting up from the very inner depths of DC Comics publishing.
But
But like
also, it makes so much sense because Delano comes from the circle that includes Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman,
yeah,
all very angry people who are very angry at the state of the world in the late 80s,
yeah,
and knowing exactly where to place the blame.
yeah.
So, the demons start cheering for Thatcher.
Yes, this is this is it. I love this is the one I always think of when I think of Delano's just political anger. Is literally the demons dancing around saying "Hooray, Maggie, 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 Maggie Thatcher." It's just it's fucking amazing. And as all these demons are very happy about this, they are informed by the Lord of Flatulence that this is actually not a good thing because he invested all of his stocks in in the souls of let's see who do you actually I forget how this actually screws him over. Hang on, wait.
I don't know how you've done it, but you've panicked the market.
That's
UK
right.
soul values are going through the floor. The smart
Yeah.
money's moved out, and I'm left holding worthless stock. Which is what happened in 1987. The economy started to crash because this was the end of Reagan. This was nearing the end of Thatcher. So you had conservatism slightly start to turn, at least in the U.S., just a little bit, though not by much, with the election of Bill Clinton. So we have to close down this party because they have now lost the market. John tries to play dead, and is essentially left alone because he won. He won, but he also lost because Thatcher won the election.
Yes, and he's left dangling there as Thatcher makes her sort of acceptance congratulatory speech to herself as he's sort of forced to watch it. With his wonderful line ending off the issue. Like I said, there's more than one road to hell. And that finishes off issue 3. It's actually kind of a fun issue, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
a refreshing one to come off of 1 and 2 with. But moving into number 4 with a very different tone, a very, very different tone. We meet Gemma. Oh, Gemma. Gemma is mad at her parents.
A lonely girl moved out into the countryside of England, finding herself on a playground. She just can't win. She didn't get a choice in the move. And she is alone for a page. Very important. We have another sequence of Constantine on his own, gambling at billiards, potentially using magic to win. And he's out with Chaz, which is a nice little moment of levity.
John goes and fucks with more of these skinheads, spraying graffiti on a wall. It says British boys kill the slur. I forgot what it said for a second as I was reading through it.
You're like, oh right, that's a slur.
That's right. I forgot that was there. God damn it. But yeah, that's happening, and John steals their spray paint can. And John walks down this alleyway, and he sees a girl sitting there in the alley with this zebra stripe shirt on and this black and white hair. And we get our title page, waiting for the man here. As I love the silhouette here, literally foreshadowing where not just this issue is going, but where this woman's story is going throughout the rest of this. Really cool stuff. But yeah,
so we go back to Gemma, same amount of loneliness, and when she's approached by 3 other young girls,
yes,
who speak talk, find out that she lives around here. But these two girls, they don't live far, and they can do what they like as long as he says it's all right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because
they're
these three
all
girls are all married to him. We don't know who him is. But yeah, it immediately makes you uncomfortable. I don't know. I remember when I read this for the first time, and I don't know. This whole scenario just makes me squirm. Ugh, I hate it.
for a lot of this. I was dreading where we would be going with this because
Yeah.
Jamie Delano probably doesn't have the fear to not to kill off a child. Like,
Yeah, no, I mean, as we will know by the end of this issue, he most certainly doesn't. But yeah, Gemma goes off with these three girls to go meet their husband. Anyway, back with John. We learned that this woman that he met name is Zed. They hit it off. They flirt. And they start to leave together. Meanwhile, Gemma is still with these three girls. We notice that there are these rope marks around their necks, which are their wedding rings. And it's, oh god.
don't worry, it only hurts for a moment, then it's really nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
So,
Jesus.
John and Zed continue to hit it off. They're about to, fall in love with one another when a radio's turned on.
Hang on. She has all these drawings in her house, and one of them is of John on a wall.
This is true.
This is something also that I really want to point out. I promised myself I'd try to like restrain myself in talking about the show, the 2014 show, as we were going through this. But this is a scene I know they took. It's not the scene itself, but the idea is in the show. And Zed has these like visions of Constantine like in her head, and she draws them out. And in the show, what they did, because Matt Ryan looks literally just like comic book Constantine, they literally just took Hellblazer covers and made them the drawings that Zed was drawing.
So Zed in the show is Dave McKean.
Yes. Well, to be fair, Dave McKean stopped after Delano left, but yeah.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn Fabry took over, so.
Fabry's.
Fabry's
that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's Garth Ennis, so, and eventually Steve Dillon, so yeah, it's Hellblazer. By the end of the Ennis run, basically becomes Preacher, like prototype Preacher. It's great. So.
Yes.
Anyway.
But
yeah, so radio. Yes, the report of 10-year-old Gemma Masters having failed to return home. And so far, 4 children have disappeared in the city this month.
And this turns out to be John's niece.
Yes. We go.
I didn't realize John had family, so this was
it's something that kind of takes you by surprise when you just know John Constantine is like this loner asshole, But no, he has family. These people exist, and we go off to see his sister and her husband, and they are talking to these people called the Resurrection Crusaders, who Gemma's parents have gotten involved with recently.
Gemma's father is a member of their church.
Yes,
Gemma's mother's gone along with it.
They're basically, I mean, you could tell immediately because there's literally a pyramid badge on one of their ties. It's a pyramid scheme, and it's great. So.
It's a good old Christian pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
Because there's Delano's doing a lot of commentary on, Christianity.
Yes. And we love him for it.
Yes.
Let's see. But yeah, John and Zed are making their way. They've stolen Chaz's car. First off, they've taken Chaz's car, and they're on their way there. Which I just find really funny. But meanwhile, the 3 girls are preparing Gemma for
her
wedding, which so
a reminder, Gemma is 10.
Yep.
All I'm gonna say about that.
Yep. I mean, all these girls are probably 10 or around that age.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway. So John goes to see his sister Cheryl, and she's.
I love the relationship. Like, it's very sibling.
It is. We will actually see a lot more of Cheryl and John's relationship as Hellblazer develops as a series. When we eventually
and John is there for his sister. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
He
Like,
like
you really get the feeling that like Cheryl is the one person that John truly cares about.
yes. Well, also like you get to realize how Cheryl's husband is just a wet blanket.
Hmm.
Like John just strolls in like he owns the place and is like, right, we're going to use magic. We are going to find your daughter. I'm going to find her things. I don't know, Cheryl, why you're part of this resurrection crusade bullshit. Um, her response involves the pyramid of prayer.
Hmm.
Um,
Which I kind of love as an idea. It's really it's a great Christian pyramid scheme. The idea is that you send in your prayers through the telephone, and as you pay more to the Resurrection Crusaders, your prayer gets moved up to the pyramid and will, I guess, be heard by God better
I mean,
because of it.
this was a thing that was not only getting very popular in the 80s with people with big televangelists. It's still a thing that happens today. Like certain groups of Christianity, especially, are just utterly insane and will spend their fortunes out of desperation. Because if you, with this weird Christian idea of if somehow you give money and all your money to the church, you're just going to become rich because God will reward you in kind. All, con men just preying on
Yeah,
people who are desperate. Um,
yeah.
and that's what this is. Um,
Meanwhile, the wedding begins. Um, the
all
husband.
well, John and Zed start to search for this this house, um, because yes, it is a wedding.
Yeah. I mean, this guy is so fucking creepy. I hate the way he's drawn. Ugh. Anyway, any- John and Zed are asking around. They find out where the house is. The wedding continues. The guy pulls out the rope. Um, oh God. John and
And
Zed get to the house. Um,
and
as they arrive there, they see that the three other girls have been killed in the meantime. Um, which, my fucking God, what the fuck, Delano?
these three girls have been ghosts.
Yep.
Um, and they burst into the basement to essentially save Gemma, and beat this man bloody.
Yes,
Um,
and I love, and I mean love, adore, like am infatuated with the panels where Zed kicks the living shit out of this guy.
it,
Great.
it's very cathartic.
I
Um,
love Zed. Do you like Zed?
I like Zed quite a bit.
Zed is
She's
great.
fun.
Yeah.
I hope her story isn't totally over though.
It is not. You have seen most of it, but it's not over yet. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, Zed beats the shit out of this guy.
We find
John,
out he's part of the Damnation Army, while John
yes.
carries an unconscious but still alive Gemma out back to her parents.
Mhm.
Um, the house catches fire and is burnt, and the issue ends on an unambiguous win for John Constantine.
Which is so nice to see.
It's kind of what you needed at this point after
Yeah. Yeah.
three fairly heavy issues.
Hmm.
Well, four
But
very heavy issues.
yeah, we have
Uh,
this note that that John is also like Zed has been denying like ever having heard of like the Resurrection Crusaders or the Damnation Army before this. John can tell that she's lying, and that is where we end off the issue. As we go into 5, Hellblazer number 5, which it's gonna get heavy again. It's gonna get really fucking heavy.
a lot of these issues are very heavy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
this one is let's take a look at Vietnam War flashbacks.
Yes, when Johnny
And
comes marching home is the name here. And oh god. Okay, so
this one reminded me almost of like an episode of The Twilight Zone.
you know
Uh,
what? Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Um,
This and
because
issue 13.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but um, this one essentially flashes between soldiers trudging through Vietnam, um, looking to kill kill and violate their enemies, because Jamie Delano doesn't seem to like the United States government for very good reasons.
Yes.
Shall we leave it at that? And then we are flashing forward to 1987, sort of earlier in the present. At one point, this is essentially, one point where John is in America. We'll get to why for.
Oh, also importantly, this is yet another flashback issue. This is August of '87. It says.
Yes, well, I believe that like 3, 4, and 5 are supposed to be sort of chronologically flashbacks.
That's interesting. I'm not sure. Okay, that's possible. I
Well,
don't think they ever
specify.
Do they specify the date in number 4?
They don't, but we mentioned the Resurrection Crusaders quite a bit in the narration, so it's clear that this is
that's true. Yeah,
supposed to be leading up and taking place a little bit before the first 2 issues.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And
but yeah,
sort of
so
there's this
it's
a town in Iowa called Liberty that basically every year has been holding the celebration, hoping their missing sons, who are essentially all dead, can be welcomed home. A farmer essentially finds a flashback into the war, where he is essentially shot dead. Those in the war thinking they are shooting a Vietnamese soldier, and starting to hallucinate, essentially as this troop, as you sort of realize that this troop from the past have been brought to the present, but fully still believe that they are stuck in Vietnam. And then we meet one Frank Ross, who was part of this troop of American soldiers, but has made it home and is suffering terribly from PTSD. Again, through Delano's narration, he almost shoots John, who wanders into town.
Yes,
at a gas station.
It's implied that he is suffering from also hallucinations. He is seeing through his PTSD John as the enemy, which it's worth noting we're not going to use any of the language they use in this podcast episode.
A lot of slurs are used.
They're consistently using racial slurs to refer to the Vietnamese soldiers that they fought, and that is
so your mileage may vary. I see what Delano's doing, but I totally understand if that is too much for you. And you're completely right to have those feelings.
I think Delano, being as confrontational as he is what makes this story so hard hitting. It's fucking rough. So he almost shoots John when he is stopped by his wife, who is it's his wife, right? No, sorry, hang on. Nope, that's wait, is it? Wait. Hang on. Am I misreading this? Or is it it's his wife, right?
It's his wife, who's essentially been mothering him because
he's not okay.
Yeah. He's not okay. John is able to rent a room for the evening. The Resurrectionist Crusade has sort of and the Pyramid of Prayer have gotten this town in their grip. All of background, all while we parallel, as the evening is, there's this festival to welcome their boys home. We parallel the soldiers getting ready with Frank Ross getting ready. There's this line about Frank Ross knows all about guilt and retribution. He leads them from the concealing cloak of vegetation. This time, he won't let them down. This time, he'll stay with them. He believes himself to be a deserter. He, like John, is feeling so much guilt over his actions. His guilt being unjustified in a very different way. There's this broadcast of bringing the boys back, and all hell breaks loose as the boys are brought home.
And they collectively sort of they collectively like hallucinate and see everyone around them as the enemy.
So they start destroying this town.
They start killing many innocent civilians here because of it. the worst moment here. I mean, throughout this whole like confrontation here, like John is sort of staying in the background, and you see John genuinely terrified throughout all this because he doesn't want to step into it because he thinks he'll get killed. And he doesn't want to either because he doesn't think there's anything he can do about it.
He does not know what to do.
Yeah, Delano makes John like the innocent bystander here that is horrified by it, but is too afraid to get involved. And I think that's a very important comment that Delano is making about not just John's character, but just on a meta text level as well. It's really important.
He eventually finds the older Frank and makes one positive choice to convince Frank to stand up as a Marine and an officer.
Well, before that, importantly, Frank kills his wife.
Yes.
Because once again, sees her as the enemy. But yeah, then John steps up, and and like you said, like the one thing that he does is he steps in and he starts commanding Ross like like a sergeant or whatever, and steps in, tells him to step into step out there, and as Ross goes out there and sees this truck coming towards him, he shoots at it. It blows up. The world literally becomes hell around John. It's fucking horrifying. Like, I had forgotten just how hard this issue went.
It's a very hard issue to read.
Yeah.
I'd argue one of the few, because of its sort of Twilight Zone-esque tone, one of the few sort of pieces of anti-war media that doesn't, I think, in any way glorify war.
No,
because that's a very difficult thing for anti-war media to even do, because just showing war almost has to glorify it.
Mm-hmm. There's this great inner monologue as everything goes to hell around John. It says, Vietnam America drowns in fire. Before I'd only seen the war. Now I know how it smells. It smells like gasoline. Which again, just fucking horrifying. This whole thing is horrifying.
I also think, oddly enough, the racial politics of the issue, I think Delano realizes, maybe not actively, but on some level, that the majority of comics marketing is marketed, obviously, to young white boys.
Yeah.
And so to humanize sort of internalized racism, that is those sort of internalized biases, generally racist biases that people have, especially young white boys raised in the US and Britain, he makes white, like, the average white person of this town that's been brought in by a religious cult, they have to be the victims here. Sort of try to connect, to really make it connect in your mind that the enemy is just a person, in a way, especially in relation to Vietnam, to sort of, especially because, let's be honest, especially in the US, the US doesn't really always teach the Vietnam War properly. A lot of times, the US, depending on where you are in the country, in a lot of places in the country, you are taught that the US were the good guys in the war. They weren't. So I think it's utterly fascinating.
And we end the issue on this great note that first of all, I love the imagery of John walking by this like video store, and you have all these like other films like glorifying war, with a sign that says films that show how it really was, and it's just
also Full Metal Jacket, which
Full Metal Jacket is there, which but John then sees like this veteran on the street. He like flashes him a peace sign, and the veteran is like armless in a wheelchair, and in almost this slightly, maybe possibly out of character inner monologue that like ends the issue, because John gets angry, but I don't think like angry like this. In his inner monologue, it says, sometime while the war visited Liberty, I stopped being an observer and became a witness. I've got the evidence. Now where's the court? Which is really interesting, and is clearly, I think, more just like Delano speaking than John Constantine speaking.
But I mean, I get it. I think it's a very important line, because even though I don't think Delano wants anyone to misconstrue what he's trying to say here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which I think Delano's aware that even if you are very, very explicit in what you're trying to say, some people will intentionally misconstrue it, especially starting in the late 80s, when Delano's writing. Yeah. And we don't ever really let up from here in terms of how dark it gets.
I mean, the annual's kind of fun.
The annual's kind of fun, but we stay fairly dark and fairly political, go a little psychedelic for a couple of issues. We'll get there. Yep. In some very interesting ways. So issue 6 shifts to gay essentially gay bashing.
Yeah.
We start with a Molotov cocktail being thrown in the offices of the Evening Standard by some skinheads. Also, once again, anti-South Asian sentiments, which were on the rise.
Yeah.
And we see these skinheads having both. One of them has a SS tattoo on one arm and an Arsenal tattoo on the other arm. So if you,
okay, we're both Americans recording this, but I find that really funny.
Oh yeah, I get the joke. It's what he's trying to do. It's hey, a lot of the Nazis that you have are just masquerading themselves as just one of the lads. They like the same football team that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And as
we see
a demon. A demon. A very important demon, though, is introduced very casually. These guys go after a demon, hang out here, and the demon, well, being a demon, unleashes hell on them. And later on, John finds his way into where this massacre took place. There's blood splattered all along the walls. There's Damnation Army written on the ceiling. And as John leaves, then we see down in the sewers, this demon is holding a meeting with his followers.
Or the Damnation Army.
Yeah. Then let's see. John is
trying to find information on the Damnation Army.
Meanwhile, we catch back up with Zed, who is being confronted by the Resurrection Crusaders, or specifically the Tongues of Fire, which are this other group that are working within the Resurrection Crusaders.
A subgroup.
Yeah. And John walks in on them. They call Zed Mary, and wait, they actually do that here, right? They call her Mary?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
it's their first line. And she promises she'll come when she's ready. She has, something of them, but she also threatens them with a knife.
Yeah.
And John diffuses the situation. But Zed doesn't tell him anything. Just asks him to sort of keep out, but, they're on the same side. As we then go see this demon induct
who has
others.
Taken the skinheads that were after him before, and is performing some kind of ritual on them as his followers watch. He's writing Damnation Army on them as
he hopes like John will get the joke.
Yes, as the bodies are being seemingly stitched together, and then there's an orgy. Then all of this demon's followers just fuck him, and it's great. I love it.
And then we have some nice, innocent sex.
that was a weird transition.
Yeah, is it weirder than the transition in the damn book?
Because at least in the book, it's more a visual transition. It's like, oh, okay, here's what the demon is doing, and then here's what John is doing. They're technically doing the same thing, but you're like, here's some nice sex.
Yeah, nice, consensual, non-demonic sex.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's be fair. The demon orgy is probably consensual.
I mean, that's true, but they're...
Anyway, I love talking about Hellblazer. Anyway, so John and Zed are
having a tender
having a
moment.
time. Yes. Meanwhile, we see the creature that the demon made with his followers. It is the four skinheads that were after him, literally, like I said, stitched together into one. I love that one of them has a little swastika earring on. And like I said, like Damnation Army is written on them. They are literally one complete being. As
this turns into a monster movie.
It does. It's actually kind of fun. They come across these the tongues of fire and they destroy their car and probably kill them.
And then they go to find John, who is, John's being John Constantine, shall we say.
Yeah.
And then the demon bursts in the window, right? And partially to attack Zed. And then John sees it, and okay. His reaction is
it's so
the
good.
Best reaction.
He starts laughing because of the body parts stitched together. One has a tattoo for Arsenal, the other has a tattoo for Chelsea. And he starts laughing. He says, "What do you do on Saturdays, lads?" And it causes the creature of the four guys like stitched together to hate each other and literally kill each other as one complete being. And it's adorable.
And it's hilarious.
It's actually a really funny moment.
Delano's really good at doing completely fucked up levity that's still levity.
It is, yeah. It totally works. John and Zed leave.
Chaz takes them to Ray's, and we end the issue on a very first on a sad note that Ray.
But it's just, oh my god. Like I said, so John, yeah. I mean, the best way to do it, I guess, is the dialogue straight. John asks Ray if he's got any trouble, and Ray says, "Yes, dear boy, I have. Someone's been spreading rumors that I've got AIDS. Now nobody comes to the shop. The window's been broken, and I keep getting these awful phone calls. And John says, "These rumors, mate, they true?" And Ray just says, "Yes, John. I'm very much afraid they are." And then there's just this really sad panel.
This page broke my heart because, like, Ray's been in one issue before this, but he was so fun.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, it's a very realistic depiction of what the AIDS crisis was. That there wasn't much support for. There really wasn't much support for it, even this late in the 80s, and a lot of the best people got the affliction and were doomed to die from it. Sadly, luckily, Ray gets a brief spoilers for what's coming up. Ray dies, but he, I'd argue, gets a better death and a more interesting death.
Yeah, because you kept saying before you got to the issue where Ray eventually dies that you're like, oh, he's gonna die of AIDS. It's, and I refuse to say anything for obvious reasons. But yeah, it's one could say he does get a better ending. Anyway, where we actually end the issue then, after that fucking downer, is John just gets a phone call from the demon.
Yeah!
I love that. Demons from hell could just call you on the phone.
And John's just kind of confused by this. It's like,
yeah, it's a really weird scene. All the demon says is he's like that. John's like, yeah, who's this? And the demon goes, that you must guess, Constantine. Once before you offended me, forcing me to chastise you. Next time I will not be so lenient. Be warned. Do not aid my enemies further. Join us. Your interests are best served in the army of the damned. And then he just stops. He just hangs up, I guess.
Yeah. And John is just like, what?
What is going on? And that ends off issue 6. Yeah, I kind of want to imagine Nergal as like Skeletor now.
I mean, you weren't already.
I mean, I could go like full like Skeletor, but like I guess
that's kind of the voice I was imagining.
Oh, for Nergal, seriously?
Yeah, kind of an over the top, almost really? Camp
See,
voice.
Maybe it's because for me, like, I guess because I know like who Nergal is in John's history, I think I take his character just a bit more seriously than reading him as Skeletor.
See, I didn't.
Yeah, I know, yeah, exactly. So like when you see this like pink demon just talking on a corded phone, you know, you're just like, oh yeah, let's have him talk like Skeletor. But me, I'm like, oh yeah, this is fucking Nergal. I know what this guy's all about, you know. So it's a bit of a different reading experience, but yeah. Anyway, on to issue 7, Ghost in the Machine, which, whew, goddamn.
This one.
So these first 3 pages are not John Ridgway. These are Britt Ewins and Jim McCarthy.
Yes. I will say this and issue 8, I think, are maybe my favorite issues of the entire like 18 issues that we've read.
Yeah, they're pretty great. I think 11 is still a favorite for me.
See, 11 just hit me too hard. It's utterly brilliant, but it hit me hard.
Understandable. But yeah, let's get into this one. So we open on a classic Hellblazer dream sequence where John is with Zed in a movie theater, and I love just first off the conflicting movies that are playing on the screen. First we have it looks like Abraham Lincoln.
I think it's supposed to be a Bond film.
We go into
have
this
a
like
monster
movie, then it's Sherlock Holmes, then it's another monster movie, and it's just as this is happening, John is making out and getting places with a fictionalized version of Zed. I say fictionalized not just because she's in a dream, but also because I don't know, somebody didn't get the memo. This looks nothing like Zed. Like I don't know, it's weird.
But she turns into a skeleton.
Yes.
John finds a zipper.
Yeah, there's a zipper within her body that like shows her skeleton beneath, and it's horrifying. And John kisses and continues to make out with this skeleton.
Here's the thing. Because of the movie theater thing. Shut up, Siri.
That's staying in.
My brain was going to the work of William Castle.
Okay.
You know, in House on Haunted Hill, where there's the skeleton that's being puppeted, right?
Yeah.
And that's all I could think of with these 3 pages.
Nice.
And I mean that in a good way.
Nice.
But yeah,
anyway. So John wakes up on the train. He's going to see his friend Richie Simpson, who works in this computer lab.
To try to sniff out the Resurrection Crusades and the Damnation Army. And Richie Simpson is a techno wizard.
Yes, who's also a hippie, and it's a really really fun idea for a character in the late 80s. But yeah, Richie says like, you know, I'm able to like tap into this computer. I could sit down and I could literally go inside of it and literally surf the web from the inside. And so first off, Ridgway plays around with the art a lot here. I love just the pixelized version of Simpson that like goes inside the computer, and we see like John on the outside. He's like, all right, well, you're clearly just gone for now. I'm gonna, you know, go get like a drink from a vending machine, and I'll catch back up with you later. Meanwhile, Zed has been staying with Ray, and again, Ray is just the best. I love Ray. Just so good.
Yeah, Delana's description of staying with Ray is like visiting a favorite granny is like, yeah, that sums up who this character is.
Yeah,
and he's a delight. And you know, they're discussing living with John and how kind of strange he is. That Ray's known John since he first came to London. We also find out that Ray had a partner who died during the Falklands War. Once again, thanks, Thatcher. And what you have here is, this idea that, Ray was, monogamous, loved it, but he was still struck down with AIDS. And asks Zed not to be afraid of saying AIDS. Don't push it away, like the response was to just sort of push the LGBT community back into the closet and ignore the problem.
get what I'm pretty sure here is like the very first hint to John Constantine being bi, which is Zed asks if Ray and John were ever a thing, and Ray is like, he first off he says, "Do you think I'd kiss and tell?" And he's like, "Oh, you're right, I probably would, but fortunately my heart belongs to another." And that's when we get into that whole conversation about his partner.
And it's treated as this. It's just I kind of glossed over because I'm like, that's treated just as a normal thing.
Yeah, that like it wouldn't be weird if John and Ray were potentially romantically or at least sexually involved at some point. I don't know. I kind of love that, but unfortunately, this beautiful scene gets cut off by these fuckers at the Tongues of Fire, who barge in.
Ray stands up because Ray, despite dying of AIDS, is kind of an honorable man and is going to try to fight these religious thugs. As he gets beaten, Zed gets kidnapped, and we don't see Ray for a while. But we do see Zed.
And Zed gets taken away by the Tongues of Fire, and
John cannot get his drink.
Yep. He kicks the machine. He can't get it out. He goes to check on Richie in the meantime.
Who makes it to the edge of the Tongues of Fire network. And
once again, we get some gorgeous John Ridgway art here. I love this big 2-page spread that leads up to like just this. I don't know. I like a really well-drawn face. I don't know. I like the way Richie's face is drawn there at the end. Anyway.
And Richie is just curious. He's trying to find more. He's finding more. And then, but on the outside, things start going wrong. Richie starts his body starts burning up, implied to be the Tongues of Fire security protocols. And John is just determined to save his friend's life, grabs a fire extinguisher, but it's too late. His body burns up, and his consciousness is on the way back.
It's stuck inside the computer as it's trying to come back, and we get this haunting scene where we see these speech bubbles from Richie trying to talk to John through the computer, as John is just horrified as to what has happened. He lights a cigarette.
And John has no idea. He can't even explain it to Richie.
Yeah, like he can't even bring himself to tell him what happened. And so all he could think
to do... We find out that the Tongues of Fire hooked into a tremendous source of primal energy that Richie got sucked into, and it's like Nirvana. And all John can do is
he just unplugs the computer and just leaves, leaving a very solemn John Constantine on a train ride home, as he reflects once again on the many, many people he has screwed over in his life. Richie being added to the lineup of ghosts that continually haunt him. And as these ghosts come once again to haunt John, it becomes too much for him, as he literally jumps out of the train. Everything goes black, and we end the issue with Zed with the Resurrection Crusaders, them discussing what they're going to do with her, and they're beginning their work tomorrow. And that is where we end issue 7. Going into 8, which is where like the big arc sort of begins, I'd say, really. It started in Ghost in the Machine, but like here's where we this is like our characters have one track to be on, and it's not really gonna steer away from this at any point, unless you're doing a Swamp Thing tie-in, I guess.
Because so the Resurrection Crusade is in Glastonbury. Zed is essentially being brainwashed, believing her time with John might be a dream. She has to be born again.
They're literally trying to make her the Virgin Mary. Like literally, like it's interesting. I believe the idea is that her name is her real name is meant to be Mary, but but Mary is literally like what they're doing to her religiously. And
there's
they're setting her up to
this
be this.
preacher preaching about that the end of the world is drawing near as the world is becoming hell. All because of the foreigners in the Middle East, people fighting for their rights, and kind of the Christian persecution complex, despite the Christian right having quite a stranglehold on power, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what this group represents.
Yeah. Don't you just
Especially
love Jamie Delano?
as Mary is passed, her body is passed over these crusaders and then prepped for surgery. And that's where we get our title page of
intensive
care,
which really refers to John, who we go over to, who since his fall out of a train, he has been and blackout, he's been taken to this literally prison, it looks like.
It's a prison.
Yeah, he's just taken to prison, which is a weird aspect to this story.
But it's also because Jamie Delano wants to say fuck the police.
Yep.
Because John is stuck in the silence, terrified of the light. 2 police officers come in, call him a pervert, and drag him down to an iron bar where he's handcuffed and then shocked.
John afterwards is then taken to this he's restrained to this bed where he's met by a doctor who is going to presumably torture him. He puts him through like this electroshock view pretty much.
Asks if he remembers the girl. John, don't you remember what you did to her in Newcastle? Of course,
and
he
we
remembers.
Get this haunting panel where, yes, of course I remember. How could anyone forget? Where we see this little girl sort of transform into this demon. Ugh, love it. Tortures John. John wakes up then in this hospital bed. He is met. Actually, no, not immediately, but he's sort of reflecting on things that have happened previously, mostly on Richie, what happened to him, and once again all the people he screwed over. And as John is laying here and starting to fall asleep, he sees this guard by his door. And as John lays there and this doctor comes in, John pretends to be asleep.
The guard's wrists are slit.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's fucked
up. An elongated tongue sticks itself in his ear. And
John is met by the face of Nergal, who we actually finally learn the name of here. This is the same demon that was talking to John on the phone, as you do. And Nergal is here because he wants John to work with him. Nergal, we learn is the leader of the Damnation Army, and he is looking to foil the plans of the Resurrection Crusaders, and he wants John to help him out with that. He wishes for John to stop the plans of the Resurrection Crusaders for him, though why Nergal can't do this himself, I'm either forgetting or is just not laid out properly.
I don't think it's laid out nearly as properly. It might just be because he's a demon and demons want humans to do their dirty work.
Yeah, or it could also be because of the eventual relationship we learn of between Nergal and John, that he wants John to do this for him because he just likes fucking with John in particular.
This is true.
Or because he thinks John is going to fail.
Yes. But there's also other things that John essentially needs to do outside of the Resurrection Crusaders. Because this arc is also going to start tying in to a couple of other things quite soon with some side steps. This is where John also John is just, almost still joking until the moment he really finds out that Ray is dead.
Yeah.
That Ray died trying to protect Zed. And, Nergal asks if John will join him. He says no, and doesn't work for he doesn't work for heaven or hell. So Nurgle then has a whet appetite, goes to the maternity ward to eat a baby, and that's what gets John to listen to the plan.
You see, John has a little bit of a heart.
I don't think that was ever in doubt.
It's kind of in doubt.
Also, John doesn't realize Nurgle is the demon that he's met before all those years ago.
Yeah. So we don't know anything about that until like next volume. So,
yeah. But we also find out that part of the issue is that hell is in chaos because humans have learned secrets of hell that they shouldn't have shared, and that a Brujeria, a witch woman, set demon against devil, turned hell on its head, plunged it into a civil war, and the tongues of fire seem to be at least partially responsible, and that there is a prophecy that at the winter solstice, a birth is going to be some sort of a healing power in the realm, and it's happening. It's supposed to be born of Zed.
Mm-hmm.
And Nurgle tried to kill Zed, but John apparently interfered with this, and demands that John use his relationship to put a spanner in the works.
Which John does agree to, but offers up the idea that, hey, I'm still kind of broken everywhere. I kind of need to get out of here first. And so Nurgle offers his assistance. Nurgle opens up his wrist, puts some blood in John's IV, which is then fed to John, which makes John a demon man. Not really. I mean, he has demon blood in him. It basically gives him demon superpowers for a limited period of time. And it's a beautifully weird idea. Yeah, it's great. I love actually this on this last page when like John like jumps out of the hospital room. How he looks there like all shadowed with like those like kind of like evil looking eyes.
Yeah, yellow eyes almost.
Yeah. But yeah, John leaves, and that is where we end off issue 8. Yawning. There we go. We're good. Oh man, we're not even done with volume 1.
Yes.
Issue 9. Here we go. John wandering the streets, feeling not the greatest right now.
Coming across a familiar old woman, if you've known the Sandman.
Yes.
With a small appearance from Mad Hetty.
Yep. We love her.
Who's great. But this issue is Shot to Hell, where John is in Gotham City.
Yep. He walks into a bar where he realizes that it is May 10th, and as such, it is his birthday, and he is not okay right now.
I think it's at this point where we are now in the sort of in the present of where the issues are being published. But yeah, and in this bar, because it's his birthday, we are shot to hell, and John sees all the ghosts.
Yep. And Ray is now included in this. And it's just, it hurts. I hate seeing Ray here. But yeah, John starts screaming at his ghosts, and everyone in the bar is obviously concerned because nobody else can see the ghosts. So they kick John out.
And
John has a one-on-one with Ray's ghost then afterwards.
And Ray doesn't blame him for his death.
Yeah.
And John now has psychic aids because of the demon blood. Which is a fascinating metaphor.
Indeed.
And Ray actually is essentially asking John to go save Zed because she loves him. And John denies that Ray is real. And he's not. So John finds a room, a dirty room, where he has some cigarettes and alcohol and dirty clothes.
And he tortures a cockroach to death underneath a bar glass. My God.
And is essentially going to drink and smoke himself to death.
Yeah.
When
John is then haunted by clothes This like tattered trench coat and shirt that start chasing him through these halls and out into the streets as these clothes fall. Then John is then just wandering the streets, completely lost, drunk still probably, and
Basically, keeps being followed. Like he nearly sets himself on fire because some
yeah,
oil on a wall attacks him, and
yeah.
then newspapers form a man and chase him down. Then money forms a man and chases him down. But a bunch of
And this
people
is
on the
also a literal thing that is happening because when the money man dissipates, the people in the street start grabbing the money.
like not even anticipates. They just start grabbing the money off the money man.
Yeah.
Uh,
um, but yeah, John is then all alone on a couch, and he is met by one final ghost, a ghost of himself. Um,
who
Not necessarily better, because is any version of John Constantine a better version of John Constantine?
this
Um,
this version is the John who realizes that action must be taken and knows exactly that. Hey, you're wrong. Your life actually has value, and you can do something about this. So get your ass up and do something. Um, which he does. It's one of my favorite scenes
yeah,
overall. Is
yeah.
this confrontation with John's subconscious because it convinces John to get up, pull himself together, shave, get on a plane,
And
get
then
some duty-free cigarettes.
yep. And then
Um,
he goes and meets with Zed, who is prepared for her ritual to commune with this angel that the Resurrection Crusaders wish to summon. John and Zed have one more night together, as it were, and as John leaves,
this
then
is
so
this is interesting because obviously John still has the demon blood in him.
and this is
So
I think it's such a smart resolution. Like I've always loved this twist that John leaves then and then like thinks to himself like Nergal knew I would never kill her, so he knew that me being with her, she now literally has demon blood inside of her, and therefore she is tainted. And it's just I love that. It's such a great twist.
um, so then John goes back to the hotel room or the flat that he has, in Glastonbury. And he opens up his cigarettes, and they start to grow
Start
plant
to
matter.
grow. They start to form a little, somewhat withered swamp thing, made of tobacco, which
Made of
is
tobacco.
which is a lovely idea. Which
And the swamp
John
thing.
John literally like pulls a piece of him off to use to smoke. Um, and yeah, Swamp Thing like takes him, lifts him up, and Constantine says that he has a plan and he thinks he's gonna like it. And that is the end of Hellblazer #9. And now it's time to talk about the insanity that is Swamp Thing 76 and 77.
So okay, Swamp Thing 76. John's not really in it.
No.
It's
I
very
mean, John's
important.
body is in it.
Yeah, but it's not John. It's the
It's
Swamp
Swamp Thing.
Thing.
It's Swamp Thing that
But
has
first we open in London with with Big Ben chiming 2, while the Phantom Stranger.
And once again, for 3 Vertigo episodes in a row, Etrigan the Demon show up.
Show up.
Yeah.
Basically, they're here to comment on events as they happen.
Yeah, comment on not just things happening in Swamp Thing, but actually probably more specifically Hellblazer, because Etrigan is aware of the goings on in Hell at the moment. So
Yes.
yeah.
Meanwhile, Swamp Thing is taking over
Communing
John's
with
body.
John. Yeah, he is now John Constantine, and it's so weird. Swamp Thing as John begins walking around in John's body.
Takes his
Meanwhile,
trench coat.
yeah. Meanwhile, we catch up with Abigail Arcane, or whatever the hell you want to call her here. This is really funny because we covered Saga of the Swamp Thing Book 1 last time on the podcast. What a different Abby we see here.
Yeah, this is an Abby who doesn't want to be alone, goes to Chester, who is currently having sex with Liz Tremaine, who we saw briefly in Book 1 of Saga of the Swamp Thing in that first issue.
Your Siri is just the worst.
Yeah, it's the worst. I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna do that. That should stop you.
But yeah, Abby then goes to the hospital for reasons we'll find out about later. Meanwhile, Swamp Thing is still in John's body, goes to the airport, and is met by Funky Flashman. He's met by Funky Flashman.
We should mention this issue is written by Rick Veitch.
Yes, who was on Swamp Thing consistently. He's the guy that immediately took over for Alan Moore.
He's currently on Swamp Thing. The next issue is also an issue of Swamp Thing, but that's by Jamie Delano, so it's a little less
chaotic.
Odd. Yeah. So, John flies, or Swamp Thing flies to Washington, D.C., sitting next to Flashman, who just kind of...
It just keeps talking his ear off. Swamp Thing then makes his way to... where are they actually landing here?
In D.C.
Yeah, and...
to a tattoo parlor.
Yep. And I kind of love this. Again, very different Swamp Thing from the one we saw in the last episode of the podcast. He decides to play a prank on John. Yeah, more on that later. Also, let's go to hell.
Someone in hell called Anton.
Yep.
Who is just cackling. Doesn't do much this issue, but is being tortured. A very different hell to the way Delano has portrayed hell.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
But then we
But you know who Anton is, right?
No.
Anton Arcane?
Oh.
Like the Arcane?
Oh. So is this like Abby's dad?
You'll find out more. I don't want to say too much right now for when we do continue reading Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, but I'll just say Anton Arcane. That's
who this is.
That's who this is.
Okay. This issue was fucking weird. Okay,
it's so fucking weird. I messaged you as I was rereading it. I was like, oh my god, I forgot how fucking insane these two issues were.
So Abby goes to Matt, who is in the hospital.
Yep.
And
which you are also very aware of, being a Sandman fan.
I know that Matt is eventually going to die and become a raven.
Yep. But
that's
for now
a
he's in a
sentence
coma.
I just had to leave my mouth, but...
Yep. But now he's in a coma right now, and Abby is debating, I mean, she's been with Swamp Thing for a while, but now she's debating official. Completely, abandoning Matt, and she takes a ring falling off of his comatose hand as a sign.
Approval.
Yes.
So again, then we go...
Such a weird issue.
So we go to the swamp, where the Swamp Thing is preparing in John's body for the evening, makes a bed, and...
Mm-hmm. Now, how did you take the thing they're about to do?
It's uncomfortable because
very
John
in this beautifully weird comic booky way though, because it's about the survival of Swamp Thing as a species, in the elemental, as the elementals go, it's Swamp Thing needs to survive beyond the current being that is Swamp Thing, and so this is what that is. It's just really weird.
So the deed starts, happens. There's some very nice character moments with Abby and the Swamp Thing, and they eventually commit to it. I'm skidding. We can go a bit quickly because this is so weird.
Yep, and also this episode is currently 2 hours long.
Yes. Very long. Etrigan and the Phantom Stranger are still there to comment on it.
You forgot that we actually see the little thing, the tattoo, the tree that Swamp Thing got tattooed on John's ass,
Oh yeah.
which I love.
So
Yeah, Anton's still being tortured, and yeah, Etrigan and Phantom Stranger are watching as Swamp Thing and Abby fuck, and it's such a weird last page too. I don't want to. I'm gonna read it out loud. Fuck it. So, so let's see. Hang on. Who's who here? Because they're just silhouettes. Okay,
Abby's on top.
There we go. So,
Swamp Thing is the
So
bottom.
Swamp Thing says, "Wait, Abby, did you just feel that? Of course I'm feeling it, silly. What did you think? No, deeper than that, all the way inside your uterus. It just happened. What? Already? You mean we're... Yes, we are. Literally fade to black."
Yeah.
And that's... It's so weird.
It's so weird.
Anyway, Swamp Thing 77. Let's go. This is the one written by Jamie Delano, so it's pretty good actually.
This is pretty good. This is so Abby's on her own, playing with this tangled charm in the swamp, while the Swamp Thing, back in its body, asks if something's wrong. And Abby's a little bit conflicted. Also, the art is by Tom Mandrake, who I love the art of this issue.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Just trying to puzzle out the fact that, she now has a baby. Swamp Thing thought it would bring us closer, but it seems that Abby's repelled. But Abby needs to be on her own. Partially because of the implications of making the baby also involved one John Constantine. So Abby finds her way outside of the swamp. Picks up a lift for someone with this American couple going into Houma, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just awful. This woman is just like wants to know all about how the monster fucking went.
Yep. And so Abby rightfully just cuts that whole thing off and leaves the car. Meanwhile, we get these great scenes in like intercutting the Abby moments where Swamp Thing is sort of like repulsed by himself, so he begins like deforming his own form. He starts like tearing his face apart, and he's just like disgusted because Abby is disgusted at what happened, but he doesn't realize that it's not because of him; it's because of John. It's a really nice little moment there. The whole issue is just that nice moment. But
yeah.
Anyway,
like Abby goes to Liz and Chester, who are asleep, and further isolating herself.
Yeah, she leaves a note for the two of them and takes their money, and then
calls
Abby
a cab.
Yes.
Finds her way to a cafe where John happens to be there.
Which is really funny when you take into account what happens in Hellblazer 10.
Yeah.
The last time they actually saw each other. Because again, really, like this and Hellblazer 10 are sort of meant to be read side by side. But yeah, so anyway, there's this like fight that breaks out there. This guy goes after Abby. John stops him. And meanwhile, Swamp Thing is making these like grass swampy like statues of people he knows and famous figures. Batman's there, Superman's there, Elvis Presley is there,
John Wayne is there.
Yeah,
I think it's supposed to be John Wayne.
Yeah, it's weird. Anyway,
so John and Abby go to this bar. They drink each other under the table.
They dance.
It's very, very nice character work, actually.
Yeah.
Are sort of
and
working
it's important to note that there's not a sexual tension there between the two of them.
No. They're just enjoying each other's very human company.
Yeah.
They find their way to a motel, mainly because they realize neither of them are fit to drive, so we need to find a place to stay for the night. They pass out, and it's actually kind of sweet.
Yeah, it is. It is.
As the Swamp Thing makes a facsimile of John and destroys it.
Yep.
Because he's jealous. The next
Uh,
day, Abby wakes up for coffee and donuts and breakfast, and they're both very happy with each other. Both kind of happy that they didn't end up sleeping with each other.
yeah.
And so, John takes Abby back to the swamp. And they find the Swamp Thing. They find out, oh, looks as if your boyfriend had a bit of a wild night, must have been cross about something. No, he wasn't angry. He was just frustrated.
And then John sees the decapitated facsimile of himself. He hugs the facsimile of Swamp Thing there and says hello. And then Abby and Swamp Thing reconnect as John leaves. And it's a great note to end that little story on.
Yeah. That's the end of Original Sins, and you can tell the story's not over, but
the story's clearly not over. Because we still have, good God, 4, 5, 7 issues left to cover.
Go.
We are 2 hours and 5 minutes into this episode, Jacob.
Yes, we are.
What is the previous record? Is it Return of Superman at 318?
Return of Superman at 318. We will see what happens.
We're only going into our second volume here, so
well,
here's the devil you know.
The devil you know. Well, here's the thing. There are a couple of issues on this that
I think honestly we could skim the last 3.
Yeah, I want to take a very different track for the horrorist specifically.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think we need to break that one down.
I think it's more of there's just more of an interesting quick summarizing the plot of both issues and then actually discussing it because it's a very different miniseries to the rest.
Yeah. Going into Hellblazer number 10 with, my God, what a freaky cover.
Freaky cover, and so I mentioned this to you.
And also freaky opening.
Yeah, so the way the layout of this first issue is, they have the cover on the left page, so you don't turn the page and open the book. Partially, I think, because of the way that
it's the way the 2-page spreads work.
Yeah, so Richard Piers Rayner is now the primary artist on the book for issues 10 to 13.
Mm-hmm. He does some wonderful work.
Oh, wonderful work! Very different from Ridgway.
Yeah,
but
Ridgway is Ridgway very much captured, I think, the grime and dirt of Constantine's world, whereas Piers sort of takes on the crazier spiritual side of John's world, and I think that's where they both succeed in very different ways, I'd say.
Yes. So we open with John's conception.
Yeah, it's just John as a sperm, and
this issue is called Sex and Death,
which Delano gets fucking weird with this one. It's great. So John, through being conceived spiritually, the idea is that this is what's happening to John as Swamp Thing has control of his body is the idea, which is so weird, and I love it.
He sees his flat, one of his downstairs neighbors, his landlady, Mrs. McGuire, all these people that he knew before he fell down the recent rabbit hole of the Resurrection Crusade and the Damnation Army and Durgal and all of that.
Jacob, could you do me a favor and say Nergal?
Nergal? Is it Nergal?
Yeah. At the very least, that's how they always said it in the show, so that's how it's always stuck with me. But I always say Nergal.
My brain reads it as Nurgle.
That's weird. I don't know. I always say Nergal.
But yeah, so
anyway, I think it's also how the animated movie says Nergal too.
So a lot of this issue is long, extended monologues from Constantine.
Mm-hmm. Also, a lot of filler pages because there are a lot of 2-page spreads that don't work out with the number of pages presented. So
yes,
yeah. You get to see that. You get to see that weird, scratchy red and black page a lot.
Yeah. But we find out through all of this that that it turns out, John was actually going to offer his body to the Swamp Thing, which this is part of the reason I'm really annoyed that this is the opener to Volume 2 and not in Volume 1. Because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't ever really get confirmation in Volume 1 about the consent of...
Could you imagine if Original Sins cut off at Swamp Thing 76?
No.
Could you imagine if the last page you read of Hellblazer Volume 1 is that weird ass silhouette page between the two of them?
No.
Oh my
No.
god.
But yeah, so we find out that it turns out that this is, this is so Swamp Thing can plant his Sprout Elemental, his prophecy can be fulfilled, the Resurrection Crusade can be stopped, and the demon Nurgle gets it in the ear. John gets the credit, and Abby gets pregnant. Everything's
wins.
coming up, Constantine.
Yep. And so the ritual with the Resurrection Crusaders begins. Zed, or Mary, is led down this aisle. She's brought to this altar where she is to commune with this angel. However, because as we have previously established, the demon blood now inside of her, everything is not okay as the entire like church that they're in starts to like crumble, and the angel unleashes hell because this because the offering here is tainted.
I will say I love that we never actually see we don't really see a physical form of
we get a little like sort of like light entity version of it in like one panel, but that's about it, which I really like. I think that's really cool. Yeah.
Sort of this unknowing eldritch horror of an angel, which is kind of what an angel would be.
That's not to say that like you can't ever like portray angels. I mean, hell, they literally do later in this volume. But I like that here specifically because it's such a human plane of where this story is taking place. It kind of fits that you don't really see the whole thing.
Yes. So what happens then is we get to see, John kind of horrified by the disruption. He thought the angel just wouldn't be there. And Nurgle finds out that prophecy is broken, Constantine was the ideal weapon, and the world is his.
Yes.
Except something has happened in the green. In Nurgle's portion of hell, plants start to sprout. And these plants start to stir as, elementals are moving, and Constantine has, by allowing the Swamp Thing to mate, has fulfilled the prophecy.
Which is really weird. It's a really weird roundabout way of kind of tying the Swamp Thing tie-ins into the main Hellblazer story. I really don't think this needed to be here.
Here's what I think happened. I think Rick Veitch was like, hey, Jamie, my good friend Jamie Delano, who I'm definitely close friends with, I have this idea and want to give Swamp Thing a kid, and we're going to use Constantine for it. So make that work with whatever you're doing with your brand new Constantine.
I mean,
book.
I do think that the Swamp Thing tie-in was more literally meant to be like, okay, Hellblazer is a new title. Let's at least let the regular Swamp Thing readers know that John is off doing his own thing now. And so there's that cross promotion there. And like but at the same time, they had to make the story work, and it kind of works a little bit.
In publishing, it's really well placed because it's coming basically right before probably the most important issue of the entire 300 issue run in Hellblazer 11.
Yeah. It's very important. But yeah, it's just again just super weird story. But
John has to fight a whale.
Yes.
And John comes through the morning after back to his body.
Yep. Or not even the morning after, literally like the second after.
second after.
He's back in his body. So we add some weird context to Swamp Thing 77 that
I honestly kind of wish I kind of wish Hellblazer Volume 1 maybe ended on this instead of Swamp Thing 77 and this collection.
See, but then you struggle even more to fill up the pages that they're struggling to fill up in Double So
No, but you take Swamp Thing 77 and you put it here.
Oh, okay. See, the trouble with that is that Hellblazer 10's ending is specifically meant to tell you to read Hellblazer 11, so it's weird to cut it off there.
Yeah, there's no
you really can't win with it. Is the point I'm making?
There's like no good way to collect these.
Yeah, unless you cut the horror rest entirely from here and you cut off Original Sins at number 9 and open the second volume on the Swamp Thing tie-ins.
Yeah, which is very possible. Just make the horror be in whatever volume was collecting the end of 1995 and 1996. I think
that would have been somewhere around like volume 10 or 11ish, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Which is whatever.
Right after the end of stuff, pretty much.
So
anyway, so John and Abby have this weird confrontation after Swamp Child has been conceived, and we as we finish off our Swamp Thing portion of the story, John makes his way back home to find
Swamp Thing is told that he's been told that, he said, remember Newcastle. And that gets John home where he
finds a massacre. Another one. He finds a massacre. His landlady is dead, which is the most fucked up image there because her head is literally on a stick.
All
John
can do is realize he knows what really happened at Newcastle. So
he goes through his files. Yep, it says Newcastle 1978. Here we go. Hellblazer number 11.
One final trigger warning, because this is the most intense and disturbing issue of both collections.
Yep. With this one probably the most disturbing cover of both collections, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And
it's so simple, too. That's how McKean does it, though, isn't it?
But his simplicity gets you. It happens with the Sandman, too.
Yeah. Fucking McKean. I love him. All right. Hellblazer 11. Yeah, massive trigger warning. It's so fucked up in so many ways that I don't even want to describe it yet.
We will probably be describing this lighter with some more insinuation than the very explicit nature of what
but the
Delano
point being is the idea is that Newcastle had been built up even since the Alan Moore Swamp Thing days as the thing that made John Constantine the way he is, the one event that fucked up his entire life and screwed him for eternity. And Delano got the opportunity to write this out in full, excruciating detail. And so he said, John Constantine is already a horrible character. He's a horrible person. He's done horrible things. We've seen those horrible things, and we've seen them completely played out in front of us. But what could be worse than all of that damned him for life?
The integral part of the character of John Constantine is he is the physical embodiment of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Even when he is fucking people over, killing Gary Lester, beating himself up, he's trying to do good.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately.
Like killing Gary Lester. He's stopping Nemoth. The death of Richie Simpson is on the path to stopping the Resurrection Crusaders.
Though, interestingly, not entirely a death, which we'll see in a couple of in an issue's time.
Yeah. But for now, like as far as we're concerned, Richie is dead, and that is still weighing on John's conscience.
Yes. We frame in the present day of John revisiting the ruins of the Casanova Club, where we find out that 10 years ago, there was this gang.
The Newcastle Gang.
Mucus Membrane, I believe, is what they're called, basically.
Mucus Membrane is the band that John is
a band that John's a part of.
Yeah. These guys are just called the Newcastle Gang.
Right. So this is the gang.
And first off, of course, these guys listen to David Bowie.
Oh, of course they do. Like, this is
just like
that. Was that ever in doubt? Like, this is.
I love it.
This is 1980s British invasion comics. Like,
we'll keep them in a scene that's meant to take place in the late 70s. Of course, these guys listen to David Bowie. But yeah, so they make their way to the Casanova Club because John is worried about this young girl named Astra.
The Newcastle gang is basically everybody who's ended up ghosts and dead in some way or another.
Yeah, it's Anne Marie, it's Richie Simpson, it's Gary Lester, it's Ben and Frank, and am I missing anyone there? I think I am. Emma, no, that's right.
And Emma.
Yeah. And yeah, that's the group. And I think the fact that Delano has gone so hard at these guys are all ghosts to John nowadays makes this flashback immediately foreboding. When you see them all lined up there like that.
And we get a mention of Ray, who pointed them in the direction of the disturbing phenomenon of this club in Newcastle. And Ben finds a cellar door that he hears sounds behind it, and for the title page, they go down and we have some gruesome massacres, probably the most gruesome massacre we've seen thus far.
Yep.
And
as they continue, as they hear this horrible, like growling, gnawing sound upstairs, it's either go up there to the horrible sound or stay down here with the massacre. And they all go up to the sound. There's this music playing, and there's these horrible sounds going off along with it, where the young girl named Astra is dancing, and this kid, fuck. So the girl starts telling John what has been going on here, which I won't describe in full detail, because first off, they don't describe it in full detail in the issue either. Rightfully so, because first off, there's imagery to go along with it, but also this child has been through some shit. That is putting it so mildly. I cannot even
This is an abused child,
physically and mentally,
in several ways. And John genuinely wants to help.
Yep.
So John believes they have to fight fire with fire, raise a very powerful demon to destroy.
Oh, hang on. Before that, Benjamin has gone off. He's disappeared. They go to find Benjamin, who, I mean, should I just say it? Like he's being sexually assaulted by a demon. A demon that looks like a wolf covered in blood.
Well, John has the plan to fight fire with fire just before they realize Ben is missing.
Okay, that's right. Yeah.
And then they find Benjamin, and So this issue takes, I'd argue, takes some cues from what I know of The Evil Dead and The Exorcist, and
most definitely as one who's seen both. Yeah. Not as much Evil Dead as one might hope. Evil Dead in the ridiculous scenario, but Evil Dead at least like kind of plays it with this edge of comedy, and like that is just not.
This is just played straight, and it's terrifying.
Yeah. So we save Benjamin by shooting the demon with a shotgun. John then begins to prepare for his ritual. He sends off different people to get different things for the ritual.
Gary Lester is sent off to get a cat, if he can, a black one.
Yep.
That has to be alive, which is now a callback. And he starts designing this ritual to summon a demon from hell. And, well, he promises nothing's going to go wrong.
And so he begins summoning this demon, and it seems, for now, that nothing is happening.
And
meanwhile, there is Emma here Anne-Marie is having a vision of John Constantine that actually is romantically interested in her, as we have sort of built up the idea that she's had a thing for John, but John has been with Who's he with? What's her name? I can't think of her name.
Emma. I think.
Is he with Emma?
Is he with Emma?
No, he's not with Emma. He's with
He's-
Judith.
Oh, he's with Judith, right?
Yeah, Emma's not here. Emma's not part of it.
And this demon quotes Hamlet, "Get thee to a nunnery."
Yep.
And Anne-Marie is thrown out a window. And
then Astra joins John and Judith as they believe the ritual to summon the demon has not gone according to plan. But Astra arrives here and begins to and begins talking to the demon that was doing things to Benjamin. The Norfolk thing we learn its name is. And Astra then literally rips the Norfolk thing's head off, her eyes glowing red, blood spewing everywhere.
Then we get that one panel where she's
the rest of it. Or no, sorry, wait, no. Oh no, sorry, no, she's no, sorry. That's her throwing up the rest of her demon form, because this is not Astra. This is in fact the demon that John actually summoned, who we did not learn the name of yet. This is not the demon that John was trying to summon, so therefore he cannot control it because he does not know its name.
We, the audience, have probably started putting two and two together exactly who this demon is.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of funny because that phone call that Nergal has with John back in issue 4, he says like you've tricked me once before or whatever, or we've been entangled or whatever. He fucking says it's he's like, we've known each other like once before, and just I think it's just important to note there that that like it's been set up for a while now, that this is in fact Nergal, although John does not know it at the time.
And Nergal is going to make a deal, take the child, and he is going to take the child, and John wants to stop it.
Mm-hmm. So he takes Astra by the hand. He begins guiding her through this hellish landscape, and as
the rest of the Newcastle gang are outside at this point.
And as John is about to escape, he gets there and finds that the only thing left with him that he is holding on to is Astra's hand, and only her hand. As Nergal has taken Astra and done we do not know what to. And that is the end of that flashback. Nergal promises to all of them that to all of the Newcastle gang that hell will come for them all. And as John reflects on what transpired there, that hell did eventually come for them all, that they're all pretty much dead now, either because of him or because of something out of his hands. And John is now very aware that Nergal was the demon that he summoned all those years ago, and that now it's personal, and now John will be taking on Nergal personally. And that leads us into the final issue of this main story, at least. And then we have some things to go over afterwards. But this is Hellblazer number 12. Before we move this, first off, before we go into the actual number 12, I want to just talk about 11 briefly. Just, are you okay?
Oh, well, it was a lot. Like
it is a lot.
It's brilliant. But it's not for the faint of heart.
Indeed.
I immediately was like, right, I have to keep going after this, or else I will not be able to sleep tonight.
We were talking. It was like a little after midnight my time, which is like 11 something for you.
Yeah,
you had finished reading Newcastle, and you were like, I'm going to issue 12. I'm like, wait, you're still reading? What are you doing? And you're like, I have to cleanse my mind. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. It has to be easier than 11.
And it is very much easier because
it's kind of campy.
It's kind of campy.
It's a little campy, isn't it?
And there's kind of a happy ending-ish.
True.
Like, there's still consequences because this is a Constantine story, but...
Yeah. It's also just not quite the ending one would expect for this story.
I'm kind of glad that we got it, because it's kind of an ending that is needed after
I think Delano just kind of knew exactly what he did with Hellblazer 11, and just kind of had fun with this last one. It's still like, Constantine, and like you mentioned, yeah, still consequences and still horrible and bloody because it's Constantine, but like it works. It works. Yeah, let's get into this. So John, still with demon blood within him, is
Hiding.
feeling the effects of the demon blood. Yeah, he's dying. He has like these like spots all over his face.
Well, he's also trying to hide from Nergal, who knows where he is. He's hiding in an RV with a Star of David on the side, essentially as a protective spell, using drugs and chocolate milk, I think, to try to keep himself awake. Because, there's just a random canister of Nesquik chocolate milk.
Does product placement in comics work the same way as it does in movies?
Part of me is very curious to see if Nestle.
Because wasn't there also Weetabix earlier?
Yeah,
Volume 1.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So
yeah.
John,
anyway, so John opens up a gas bill.
Yeah.
First off, first of all, it has a message on it. It says, "Constantine, you treacherous bastard! I can get into your bank account too. Phone this number pronto." And it's signed off RS. And also, I just love that the bill total is 19,666.23, which, first off, I just kind of like the idea that if John never contacted Richie would just keep raising his gas bill through the computer.
But here's the thing: I would imagine that Richie would try to keep it with a 666 somewhere in the bill.
Yeah, it would still be there. Yeah.
And John is like, "Holy shit! Richie's not dead. He's alive in there. He might hate me, but he's not dead." So he calls the number, and I love Richie and John's interactions because what I've loved what Delano's kind of done so far, and you get it with Ray's Ghost, and you kind of get it here, is that even when John fucks people over, they don't necessarily hate him for it because they know that John is technically a good person.
Yeah, and also they are well aware of who John Constantine is. They kind of expect it from him. So Richie is like aware going into this confrontation with John that like John may still try to do something to screw him over in the end. And so Richie comes up with his own backup plan, and Constantine, being Constantine, has his own backup plan. But more on that as we go through the issue. So John hooks up a computer. He
brings some special computer equipment in.
Yes. So, importantly, we have a meeting between Nergal and the beings known as Agony and Ecstasy, who are summoning Nergal back to Hell.
And we find out that Nergal isn't in Hell's good books. That the current triumvirate of Hell, which
Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Belial,
which is not the same triumvirate we see in the Sandman.
Well, yeah. True, but
also 2/3 of it are the same.
Lucifer is definitely meant to be the same Lucifer because
and Beelzebub was meant to be the same Beelzebub.
Because this does get commented on in some later Hellblazer comics when Gaiman does the whole Lucifer leaving Hell thing in the Sandman. They do sort of work in tandem. So
I was meaning to point out Belial. So I find it interesting that Hell seems to be an evolving place throughout the DC universe, because this would have been a little bit before Sandman was just starting.
Yeah, ever so slightly, yeah, because Fear Machine is where the actual crossover took place.
Yeah,
which is the third volume of Hellblazer. So John gets inside a computer and talks to Richie, and they start coming up with a plan to defeat Nergal. So Nergal becomes aware of Constantine challenging him. He leaves Agony and Ecstasy to go challenge John himself, and finds that John is technically not there. His body is there, but Nergal does not sense John's actual presence there. So John tells Nergal what he has to do. He has to hook himself up to the computer, just like John, to get inside there. So John's body is currently inhabited by Richie. Richie Simpson is inside John, and Nergal enters the computer to battle John, because this is certainly the climax to this massive 12-part story that one would expect, I guess. Like, it's very out of nowhere, but it kind of works.
So there's a bit in the novel Good Omens where the demon Crowley is running away from the Duke of Hell Hastur and Duke of Hell Liger. He kills one of them with holy water in an amazing scene, but then he traps Hastur in the phone lines of an answering machine.
That's fucking brilliant.
That's all I could think of while I was reading this issue.
That is funny.
Mind you, this predates Good Omens by about 2 years, I think, because Good Omens came out in the 90s. But that is all I could think about.
Wait, what year did Pratchett die in?
2015.
Okay, all right. That is way more recent than I thought it was.
Yeah, no, reason. He died recent, and it's very sad. But that's a tangent that we don't need to get into. I
just don't know much about Pratchett, to be fair. But anyway. But yeah, we begin this chase between John and Nergal within the computer, and John basically does the same thing that Richie did when he was going after the Tongues of Fire, that he goes to the edge of this digital landscape where... Look, I really can't explain it. I can't explain it at all, but it works. John takes Nergal to the edge of heaven through a computer, and this pisses off these angels who destroy Nergal with the wrath of God. And it works, doesn't it?
Yeah, it somehow
in a really bizarre way. It really works. I don't know.
Shouldn't, but it does.
And that's how we stop Nergal. And so Richie, inside John's body, is not so willing to give John's body up because Richie has been without a body for some time. And so John says, well, hey, joke's on you, bitch. I have demon blood inside me and I'll be dead soon. So you are going to die soon in that body anyway. So what you're better off doing is detaching yourself to this here computer again and getting inside that there demon body.
Right.
And Richie's like, Constantine, you bastard. All right, sure. And he goes inside the demon's body.
And he's not wrong. John is not lying here.
He's not. But this was totally John's plan. Like he knew that Richie would probably try to screw him over here.
Yeah. But I don't think John knew about what's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So John gets back in his own body, and look, again, for reasons I can't explain, but totally work. Nergal being in Nergal's body and Richie's digital consciousness being combined makes a digital electric demon out of Richie Simpson. I don't fucking know, but I love it. It's so weird. It totally works. Yeah, digital electric demon Richie Simpson is looks exactly what you would hope he looks like. First off, but also is then confronted by Ecstasy and Agony,
who congratulate Constantine on winning, and it's like, you're not going to be lucky enough again, but goodbye demon blood because of that. Because you defeated Nergal.
Yep, and they take, because Richie is still in Nergal's body, technically, they take Richie to hell, and Constantine's face begins clearing up, and that is the end of Hellblazer number 12, and the end of our main story.
So what we have next is 13, the Annual, and the Horrorist.
Which are all very much their own stories.
Their own things. They're all three very different things. So
we start off on Hellblazer 13, which, if you haven't been horrified enough by things like issue 11 and 7 and things like that, we're here again. So John deserves a holiday after all he's been through. He makes his way to the beach
on the seaside in the UK. I think he's either in Brighton or Blackpool, one of the two probably. He gets himself an ice cream. He sees some protesters. Is reflecting on society. Sees some protesters.
He notices that there is a power plant at the other end of the beach that he's on, and a lot of this is just Constantine's inner monologue. And one of the things I love about this is, first off, spoilers for what issue 13 is, but if you've made it this far...
This is Jamie Delano has seen Threads and wants to write the horrors of nuclear annihilation.
But at the same time, he's technically writing in main DC continuity, and he can't just blow up the world with nuclear radiation. So he's got to do a dream sequence, and an extended dream sequence. And so I kind of love, first off, that I can't tell exactly where the dream sequence is supposed to begin. I don't know. It's just kind of hard to tell for me personally.
I think it's at the point. I think it's obviously at the point where he's sitting down, and something moves fast. I think that's where the dream sequence really begins, and you see the two fighter jets.
See, I would say he's awake for a little bit longer after that, because I think it's got to be long enough that he notices the boyfriend and girlfriend with the guy that works at the power plant first, and then I think he falls asleep.
Possibly.
Oh, well, yeah, that's got to be it. Because
right.
the guy throws the can, and then Constantine literally takes a nap.
Yeah, so then Constantine takes a nap, and the power plant goes into meltdown, and the world...
Seagulls literally fall from the sky.
Starts snowing. A mother and her children are huddling for warmth in the fallout as nuclear winter sets in. The girlfriend asks for a cigarette.
The boyfriend, importantly, at this point, has run off to his job because, what is it? He thinks that like his shoes are going to be destroyed. The girlfriend is left alone there. Constantine begins talking to this mother who lost her children there. She's trying to find them, or the one child. I forget exactly what it is.
And you see them with clear signs of radiation sickness.
Yeah.
And like, basically we just go into surrealism as everyone slowly succumbs to radiation poisoning.
Yep. There are these like guys in like hazmat suits that like start scanning the area. Eventually the mother takes her two children into the ocean and just drowns them.
And make them grow gills.
John's skin is growing these like splotches and from like radiation, and
he pulls up an irradiated sort of like crab thing, finds the girl. They
begin living in a sand hut together,
eating the fish fingers. They succumb to radiation poisoning. The girl becomes pregnant and gives birth to a seal that has two heads and dies. The seal
and then is eaten by skeleton vultures. And John screams that they've taken like the only thing, his last chance for immortality. And as John runs into the ocean, he turns into a skeleton and he's collapsing slowly into extinction. And God,
he wakes up.
How horrifying is that, dude?
I kind of just laughed at this issue.
Did you? Did you?
Yeah. I get it. It's horrifying, but like, I just read this after 11 and 12, and I was like, oh, this is a dream sequence. So this is just surrealist and kind of funny.
Oh my god, what is wrong with you, man?
Newcastle fucked me up, okay?
I kind of like that that's your limit.
Look, Newcastle, like, there's a reason Newcastle...
Honestly, I think because Newcastle is, like, about demons and ridiculous gore and everything, like, it's still scary stuff, but it's also, like, so weird it can't really, like, affect me mentally. Like, this is, like, about actual nuclear radiation, and it kind of, like, fucks me up. It's still great. It's brilliant. I love it. And, but yeah, it's haunting. I don't know. I love it. Anyway, let's talk about some weird issues.
So the annual is 2 stories.
Yep.
One that is an extended surrealist flashback dream sequence where Jamie Delano, I think it's still Jamie Delano writing.
Yeah, it's all Delano. Yeah.
Is doing a story about Arthurian knights and Merlin.
I will say, this is a trend that I've read at least like I think 3 different DC titles in the 80s that did like this exact same concept that like traced a main DC character back to like back to like medieval times and ancestors that looked and acted exactly like them. It's really weird.
For Constantine, it makes sense. And I'm guessing this annual is what originally
the other one that immediately comes to mind is they did Mike Grell did one for Green Arrow that I read recently.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
No, but what I was going to say is I wouldn't be surprised if this gave Neil Gaiman the inspiration for Joanna Constantine.
Oh yeah, very possible.
Very possibly. Brian Talbot is the artist on this annual. Yes. At least for the first story. There's also like a 6-page backup story at the end that is.
It's fun.
It's a fun. It's a music video.
It's a music video. Yeah, it's a music video.
Like it's a great because there's the frame story of this is John. Is seeing more of the Falklands War. We have Delano being suitably anti-Thatcher.
Yep.
Taking medication, and we're kind of exploring John's time in a mental institution. In the past, in the Ravenscar facility for the dangerously deranged.
And John meets up with this this like guy that he used to know that like releases music videos, I guess. And he's like, "Hey, John, you had your band. It is Mucous Membrane. You guys made a video before it was like even big. You give that to me today, I could sell it and make it a big thing." And
this is also taking place in 1982.
Yes, so like well before any of the Hellblazer stuff we've read this in this, except for Newcastle, obviously. But yeah, so that's all happening, and John meets up with this girl who talks about the history of this place and sets up the whole flashback idea of medieval John Constantine, and also they fuck, I guess. And John dreams about medieval him. First off, I do love the art on this. Brian Talbot is so good. Like it
is so different from everything else, but it's really
it's grotesquely detailed. I love it.
Yeah. So this is a story of almost a mad King Arthur, of Arthurian legend, of a Lord Abbot who is trespassed upon, and is called a warrior of God. A Lord Abbot who has a mechanical right arm.
Who then begins talking to the severed head of Merlin. I just kind of love the comedy duo that is. Well, first off, spoilers. This is an old version of the medieval Constantine ancestor, Constantine, which I love that. But I don't know, they're kind of a comedy duo. It's really funny. This is the one that I found like a weird, like dark sense of humor, and I
found this one really funny too. Yeah. I also found it kind of long for the annual. Like I know it's an annual, so it's double length.
Yeah. Yeah, I script like for my Hellblazer reread for this episode. I read like a single issue every single day. This one I did like a couple pages throughout the day. Like I was like, here's a section of this now, and here, and here. The only break I took was between the 2 horrorist issues because it's the horrorist. But yeah, I don't know. It's still fine, but yeah, it is a bit long and probably not the greatest thing in these 2 collections.
It has themes of being cleansed for one's sins, for traveling through time, of subverting sort of the idea of a gallant knight, knight in shining armor, all sort of classic King Arthur stuff. There's a beautiful woman at one point. There are ships and battles. And, it's all about how Constantine let everybody down, went mad, and receded into himself.
He also just burns the severed Merlin head, and the severed Merlin head is now charred and just keeps talking and telling its story to him. Which, again, I just find really funny in this weird sort of black comedy way. But yeah, It's fine. I don't know. Yeah, it's okay. I don't know. It's not one of my favorite Hellblazer stories, obviously.
It does lead to John in the present finding the music video.
It does, which is where we get the second story in the annual, and we get actually probably like the best Chaz appearance in these two volumes, with that conversation between the two of them at the end. There, it's really nice. Yeah, they not only find the music video, but they watch it, and it becomes the second story in the annual, where you literally see the lyrics of the music video and the kind of visuals that were there. And great, it's nice, it's fun,
it's fun stuff, and
yeah.
Well, now you'd
think by how fast we got through that we'd want to talk about the horror rest. It seems that way, but I can guarantee you we don't.
I think we need to take a different tack. So the horror rest is 2 issues. It's 100 pages, published in 1995 and 1996.
Yep.
David Lloyd is the artist, and the art is great.
The art is so unbelievably good. Like, if Delano just kind of knew what he had with David Lloyd as his partner on this, like, I think he would show a bit more restraint.
It feels like there's been a miscommunication through this entire 2 issues. So the plot is, there is this woman who is causing all sorts of suffering throughout the world.
She's
spreading the suffering
supposedly
around.
A demon, and Constantine is investigating.
Constantine is investigating, and he is very apathetic.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
All of this is Jamie Delano's treatise on human suffering and how humans make, and how the powers that be make things terrible for humanity. And that could be a brilliant 100-page story. It could. But first off, this is a point where I think Delano's tendency for prose becomes too much. There is a lot of prose through all of this where you don't need it.
I think there are some fairly effective scenes early on, because at the start of both issues, Delano is very light on dialogue to make those first couple of scenes hit really hard in both issues. But then he goes, really hard into that prose, and it comes across as a bit more of a chore than it does with that rich text that he had back when he was writing Hellblazer.
Yeah. And there's this interesting motif of this dopey face that shows up essentially whenever something bad is about to happen. And John has it right at the end, right before he breaks out of his apathy, because I really like the closing moments of the story.
So I remember when I read the horror rest. This is only the second time I've ever bothered reading the horror rest, only because I have to, really. And I remember, like, on my first read, I was like, you know what? Most of that sucked, but the last scene was really good.
Yeah.
And then this time, I didn't like the last scene as much as I did
That's
before.
Interesting.
So when I say the last scene, I'm more specifically talking about the final confrontation between Angel and John.
Oh, no, I'm specifically talking about literally the last.
Yeah. So like that scene is great. Yeah, but like when I thought of like the last scene, I was like, oh yeah, the last scene between John and Angel is really good. But aside from David Lloyd's art, I don't like that last scene. David Lloyd, first off, really takes the weird surrealist grotesque approach to that I think really works. I love the whole bit where they like peel their skin off together and show themselves. Like, it's all metaphorical. And if the rest of the miniseries didn't just make me feel as like cold to it as I am, I think moments like that would really stand out to me. And they just don't as much, and I kind of write off a lot of the horrorist as it is.
Yeah, like, I mean, this is the story where there is a sex scene that
because John is so cold and dead inside, man. He can't even get hard, man.
But here's the thing.
You don't get it, man.
The dialogue is what makes that sex scene the worst thing of the book.
Dude,
because
so bad. It's like, so bad. Because it's not even just the line that I make fun of. I always make fun of here it is. Harder, you pathetic stiletto bitch. I still can't fucking feel it. Said by John Constantine, mind. But honestly, after that, she's like, I can't. It's like flogging a dead horse. Told you so. I'm sorry. I thought, forget it. I'm cold.
If there was no dialogue, and
it could be effective. It could be effective. Yeah. Like,
this is Jamie Delano not knowing what he has with an artist. Like,
I think Delano is also just kind of aware of his reputation from Hellblazer and is kind of trying to recreate that. It isn't just sliding back into what he did in Hellblazer.
yeah, which is interesting. It's, again, for a story that's 100 pages, 2 double-length issues, the plot is actually quite thin, which,
It is. It
again,
really is.
would be fine if you really leaned into the serialist stuff 100%.
Yeah.
But they don't.
Yeah.
But David Lloyd's art is great.
David Lloyd's art is truly fucking brilliant. Like, I think, like, just the miniseries is genuinely like a 5 out of 10.
I think it's a little weaker than that.
Maybe a 4. I could see a 4, but really, like, I don't like what Delano's doing, but I think Lloyd does like so much heavy lifting with his art that I think it does make up for a lot of the weak points in it.
Yeah, but I will say it's at least bad in an interesting way.
True.
It is.
Wow, I hate your Siri.
Yeah.
How does that keep happening?
I did the do not disturb for 1 hour. I should have done it longer.
Yep. See, you fool. We're almost 3 hours in.
Yes. But yeah, that's what the horrorist is. It is. It's. Yeah. If you actually try to describe the plot, it gets very contradictory and weird.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of intense imagery. But again, if you lean into the surrealism of David Lloyd's art, it would probably work better.
Yeah.
It's also just a weird thing to place at the end of this volume.
Yeah, it was clearly a page space thing. Like, they're like, oh my god, because the Fear Machine is up next after the annual in issue 13, so it's got to take up its own volume because it's one complete story. And it does. It takes up all of volume 3. So they can't just toss in the first couple issues of it at the end of volume 2. And so they had to think of something else to throw in there.
And because these specific editions were DC's successful attempt to put all 300 issues of Hellblazer into one set of trades.
Yep, which they did. They finished it all.
They obviously didn't want to go too short on any of the 1 volumes, or else they would just never get it done.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, even then, it's still a 26 volume collection. Like, and I don't even have it all. Like, they only just finished collecting them last year.
Yeah. And so it's there. I kind of wished they maybe just readjusted volumes 1 and 2.
Yeah, well, but clearly we also do know that like volume 1 was ripped straight from an older version of the trade.
Yeah,
where they did just have 1 to 9 and the 2 Swamp Thing tie-ins.
Yeah, so I guess that makes sense. But yeah,
I feel like you could have adjusted it for the newer editions, though.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's oh my god, that's that.
That's that. We
almost 3 hours later. Wow.
On your favorite character.
Whew, we did it. We did it.
Jacob,
I have one question for you. Do you like John Constantine?
I do. I like him a lot.
Yes.
I like him a lot.
As long as you say you like him, I have succeeded.
I think there are things that could have been better about these first 2 arcs. Especially the horrorist. That would have brought the score of that second book up quite a bit. And I hope we never go lighthearted with John, but we don't necessarily go that dark for that long. Because
it's interesting. Obviously, with a 300 issue series like Hellblazer, it goes through its fair share of like different tones and eras. So it's none of it is quite the same. The rest of the Delano run is very much what you saw here. It's big on its longer arcs. It has a complete story. It's done by issue 40, I think. I think it's 40 is the last one. And it ties up everything that Delano wants to do with the book. There are even some guest issues in there, some from Grant Morrison and one from Neil Gaiman. It's nice. The Neil Gaiman one has full interiors by Dave McKean, which is awesome.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's fucking beautiful. but yeah, it's he's a character with a very long history, and for the most part, people love the character, and that love for the character has caused his characterization and the stories that people tell with him to be very much told with love and consistent for the most part. And I think that's a lot of why I and many other people love the character so much. Yeah, so I it's worth noting, on a bit of more of like a personal level, like I love Constantine mostly because the comic shop owner of the local comic shop that I go to, that I've been buying comics from since I was like 11, his favorite character ever is John Constantine, and like I was like, oh my god, who the fuck is this guy that you love so much? And I got into Constantine because of him, and he's sort of like, he was like my guide through all of that, and I don't know, he's a great dude. His name's Mike. I don't know, I just wanted to call him out because he's the whole reason I love the character, and the whole reason that we spent nearly 3 hours talking. Actually, no, we're at 3 hours now, I think.
I was gonna say we've got to be at 3 hours.
Yeah, we're definitely at 3 hours now. Yeah, talking about his and my personal favorite character in all of comics. So yeah, he's one of a kind. So all right, Jacob, I have one other question.
Yeah, we are. Oh gosh,
do you want to find
50.
out what episode 50 of Fresh Face Comics is?
You know what? No, I don't need to know. I'll just show up and you'll do the heavy lifting.
Okay, sure. That would be quite the experiment if one of us just read a whole book and tried to like have a full-on conversation like this when only one of us has read it.
The book, yeah. Well, I have some guesses.
Yes, you do.
I have some guesses. I am 99% sure it's going to be something Batman, because Batman started the podcast. It would be Batman would be a way to end our first big 50 episode run of DC before we move on to Marvel with episode 51.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we are either going to be starting Batman by Tom King or Batman by Grant Morrison.
Do you have any other guesses, or is that it?
Those are the two I'm locking in.
Okay. If you had to like lean specifically into one or the other, what would you say?
Oh, that's hard. That's difficult. Because I could see, with where we are in Batman reading, those both as logical next steps. The Morrison stuff because of Damian, the Tom King stuff because it's the stuff that comes after Snyder. Maybe leaning just a little bit towards King because I know you love that run so much.
I do love both runs. If we're talking about those two in particular, like Morrison and King are well, they're fucking great. Yeah, I love them. I will say, when I was making up the schedule for 1 to 50, like I hit 50 and I was like, there was, in my mind, there was literally only one option I could go for. It was like the book that immediately sprung to mind. I was like, we need to do this. It has to be the 50th episode. It makes too much sense. So next time on Fresh Faced Comics, for our 50th episode, we are talking about Batman, the Rebirth Deluxe Edition, Book 1 by Tom King. We're starting the Tom King run.
Okay.
And we're doing a lot of it. I did say the Deluxe Edition. We're covering Book 1 of the Deluxe Edition, which does also mean you're going to have to get a second book because there are some tie-ins.
Because there are some
tie-ins. So this is, in particular, let me pull it up quick. Actually, if you're looking at it trade-wise, it's the first two trades of the Rebirth run plus the trade for the tie-ins. So this is Batman's Rebirth number 1, and then 1 through 15 of the main run, plus
that's 4 a lot for one book.
It is. It's a deluxe edition. And then Night of the Monster Men collects Batman. So it's the crossover happens at Batman 7 and 8. So it's like right in the middle there between the first two trades. It has ties into Nightwing number 5 and 6 and Detective Comics 941 and 942.
Okay, so
it is a grand total of 20 issues.
Okay.
So it makes a lot of sense to me because we've never done Rebirth before on the podcast. We finished the Snyder run. We started the podcast on Batman. We should do 50 up for Batman. And also, it was originally also planned because we hadn't thought of fresh face one shots at the time, and you would have never read Tom King before at this point. So that's kind of out the window at this point. But
I mean, we've read one Tom King thing at this point.
We also read his short Wonder Woman story. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So yeah. Sorry, didn't work out exactly the way I wanted, but it still makes a lot of sense, I think. So yeah, that'll be that. I am so excited to talk about it with you.
Okay, and, that's also just a lot.
It is a lot. It is
a lot.
Yeah. Also, for those listening, as you know already, after episode 50, we're going into our first block of Marvel books. It is not 50 episodes long. I apologize for that. But quite simply, as I've explained before on the podcast, it is because me personally, I just have not read nearly as much Marvel as I have DC. If you've been following me on Twitter, you know I've been keeping these giant Marvel reading threads over the past year and a half, little over a year and a half at this point, of like every Marvel thing I'm reading. And I think like that like me going through that and just like sharing that with everybody is literally like just telling you exactly how much I've read. So while it is a lot, trust me when I say I've read probably about 10 times more DC than I have in both of those threads for 2022 and one I have so far for 2023. So when I say that the first Marvel block is only 10 episodes, I mean it when I say the amount of Marvel we cover on the podcast will increase eventually. Just not in the immediate future. But we are making our first step into that. That'll be episodes 51 through 60 for Marvel. And then we're jumping back into DC for episode 61. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Wow, we are on episode 50 next time. That is insane to me. How did we get here?
One episode at a time.
We literally one episode at a time. Yeah. And 7 bonus episodes. Yeah. And a fair few one-shots, which, speaking of, let's promote some things.
Yes,
if you're not watching Fresh Face One-Shots, where are we at? We have finished Night Terrors by the time this comes out.
Yeah, so this is out on the...
this is out on the day before the final issue of Night Terrors comes out. So we will have covered, as of this week that this comes out in, all 6 main issues of Night Terrors. That's First Blood 1 through 4 and Night's End, and also the 2 Superman tie-ins, Night Terror Superman 1 and 2. So that's all out. Meanwhile, we have also been covering Batman Brave and the Bold by Tom King and others.
Which I believe that will probably be out or is just coming out.
The fourth one will be out at that point. So yeah, so we have 4 issues of that out. We've also been covering Superman by Joshua Williamson. The annual came out earlier this month. There are 5 regular issues out of that, and we did also cover Wonder Woman 800, which is our lead into next month for September. We're starting the one-shots for Tom King's Wonder Woman. So
that will be
lots of Tom King in your future.
So that'll either be Wonder Woman 1 or 801, depending on how you want to number it.
I'm gonna label it number 1 because number 1 sell.
This is true.
So yeah, so next month we have Superman number 6, Brave and the Bold number 5, and Wonder Woman number 1. So that's getting us into our regular sort of pattern of how we're doing one-shots from this point on. Night Terrors kind of threw us for a loop, but it's been fun. I've been having a lot of fun with Night Terrors.
It's been fun, but it's been a lot.
It's been a lot, yeah. So thank you also for watching those. That's been awesome. Also, otherwise, we have Star Trek videos coming out of the channel. I forget what episode we're on as of this week. I want to say it's Wolf in the Fold. So then, it's Tribbles, isn't it? Tribbles.
I think it's
Tribbles. Yeah, Tribbles. The Trouble with Tribbles is out. Yeah, both my video with my brother and your review on your blog will be out for Trouble with Tribbles at this point, which is
Joey
a very famous Star Trek TOS.
I have not, because Joey watched stuff in advance.
It's a very famous episode of Star Trek: The Original Series. It's incredibly fun, and I can't wait for you to watch it. So that's fun. At the time of recording, you haven't watched it yet. So, but I have not. Because I gotta edit whole videos for it. So anyway, but yeah, those are out. Also subscribe to the channel, Blood Edit Studios. We have recently hit 300 subscribers. So we're on our way. It's been fun. It's been a great time. It was a very quick ride between 200 and 300, but now we're back to a normal pace. I think I just got stuck in the algorithm for like a month there. So, which I'm not complaining about at all. It's been nice, but it's back to a normal pace for me. So that's kind of cool. Also, we have let's see, I think that'll be out already at this point. Yeah, probably. Oh, no, probably not yet. Breaking Brian is continuing probably this week that it comes out. Better Call Saul season 2 will be out soon, so be sure to check that out when that comes out. We only have 4 videos left to do after that point, so that's been really fun.
If you're following my blog, I will be in the middle of series 4 of the Doctor Who revival reviews at this point. So check those out. Those have been fun, and enjoyable as we inch ever closer to the 60th anniversary of that show.
Yep.
And if you haven't checked it out already,
was that Siri again?
It might have been. Why
God.
are you? I don't want you. I don't want you.
This is great. I love this.
If you don't, we also released our first commentary on Blood Donut Studios.
Yes, yes. If you want to see that,
of the 1997.
I don't know if you do. Yeah, with our good friend Mason, we watched Steel 1997, starring basketball superstar Shaquille O'Neal. I got drunk. I can't do math. Mason and Jacob were there. I think that night's hazy for me. It's
Mason and I were attempting some sort of analysis.
I was not.
Yes.
So yeah, check that out. Watch Steel if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it. But anyway,
I think that's all the plugs.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, cool. All right. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time with our 50th episode, this has been Joey Morgan
and Jacob Licklider.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.